Harry Potter, the Formidable Wizard of Beauxbatons. Chapter 61. Oh, failed again. Fred walked to George, his face full of depression and dissatisfaction. Lee Jordan shrugged. Is it his fault? His family is even poorer than the Weasley family. The Weasley family still has regular jobs, and both his father and brother are paid. In the British wizarding world, black wizards rarely have other jobs besides smuggling contraband. Moreover, he only has many more siblings than the Weasley family. The family only gives him 10 kilos of pocket money every month. If Hogwarts did not provide free food and accommodation, it would be a question whether he could come to school. If the snake-turning coil hadn't been priced so high, 3 gold galleons, which was a little more than his 5-month living expenses, Lee Jordan might have bought the snake-turning coil. Ahem. George coughed twice, and after focusing the attention of the 3 people on himself, he said, Fred and I experimented during the summer vacation. The coil can bear the weight of the 2 of us at most, so we climb up in 2 groups, no problem. Farkey, didn't you just say you could pull up an elephant? You lied to me, Fred. Lee Jordan pointed at Fred. He didn't expect that his best friend would actually lie to him. Fred smiled awkwardly. You didn't buy it, didn't you? Besides, you didn't specify how many pounds an elephant should weigh. Aren't newborn elephant babies also called elephants? I'm such a fool to believe you. Lee Jordan took a few steps back, feeling as if he was being stabbed by a knife. Subconsciously, he wanted to leave here and go to a place where no one was around for a while. Pipeline, isn't the complex underground pipeline where he wants to be? As long as they run into the pipeline, George and Fred will never find themselves. Thinking of this, Lee Jordan rushed towards the pipe mouth nearest to him. Hey! Don't go there, be careful of getting lost. A familiar voice came into my ears, it was Fred's shout. After living with the brothers for a year, Lee Jordan could tell who was George and who was Fred from their voices as long as they didn't act weird and imitated each other's tone of voice. Lee Jordan's forward movement gradually stopped, and George and Fred heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. Lee Jordan had never seen the Marauders map, and it would be easy for him to lose his way and find a safe exit if he rushed into the underground pipes. Just when Fred opened his mouth and was about to apologize to Lee Jordan, the black boy moved again. Lee Jordan ran into a sewage pipe about 2 meters high that led deeper. There was a huge, winding trace at the bottom of the pipe. Unfortunately, neither Lee Jordan, who was closest to the pipeline, nor the 3 Louises, who were standing at the junction of the pipelines, noticed the traces caused by the long-term crushing of this large animal. The black skin blended perfectly with the darkness in the pipe. The moment he ran into the pipe, Lee Jordan disappeared from the sight of the 3 people. Farkey! Lee Jordan, this idiot! George, come with me to catch him back. Fred picked up a portable oil lamp and waved to George as he ran, asking him to accompany him to find Lee Jordan. I'll excuse you for now. If you can, please help us close the underground pipe entrance when we go up. Also, please don't tell the professor. Fred and I will bring him back safely. George finished speaking in a hurry. By this time, Fred had already run into the pipe. He picked up another portable oil lamp and ran a few steps when Louis stretched out his hand to stop him. Please let me go, Mr. Louis, I want to find my friends and brothers. After saying that, George ran in the other direction, but was stopped by Louis again with his hand. Now that we have met, I will go and help. One more person will bring more strength, right? Louis would naturally not miss following the twins on their adventures, so he took the opportunity to test the twins to see if they had obtained the Marauders map. Okay, but remember to follow me closely and don't get lost. George agreed without thinking. He didn't want to waste too much time on whether Louis should go or not. He just wanted to find Lee Jordan as soon as possible. They only brought 2 portable oil lamps, and in his and Fred's hands were the supplies the twins had prepared for the expedition. Since Lee Jordan joined halfway, the twins did not prepare anything like an oil lamp for him, but only prepared a disposable alchemical plastic jacket to isolate odors and dirt. It was a trophy that Arthur Weasley brought home from the Department of Misuse of Muggle Articles, confiscated from a certain wizard. George and Fred took a few of them secretly while Arthur was not paying attention. George ran ahead to lead the way. Considering Louis' physical condition and fearing that he would not be able to keep up with him, George slowed down a bit at first. Until after running through a few intersections, George began to breathe softly, and Louis followed closely as if nothing was wrong. George speeds up, and Louis also speeds up, There is always a distance between them, so Louis will neither lose nor bump into George. It seemed that they had already obtained the Marauder's map, or had already explored the underground pipelines. Two thoughts came to Louis' mind. George, who was running in front, would remind Louis loudly to be careful every time he reached a corner. Although George pretended to be very good and always waited for the light to hit the bend before warning him, Louis deduced from his body movements that George had already known that there was a bend ahead. Normal people's bodies will always respond when they encounter an unexpected accident. For example, when a truck hits them, some people are at a loss and stop waiting for the car to hit them. Others will dodge to the side. But George didn't. When he encountered a curve, he ran almost as usual, turning his body silkily, and then continued running. Not long after, a fork appeared at the end of the pipe. George followed the mark left by Fred and ran into the second pipe on the right. The pipe is about 1.8 meters high, and the shortest part is only 1.6 meters. Not only are there deep marks on the ground, there are also scratched scales on both sides, and some unknown mucus remains in some places. Following the marks deeper and deeper, the bottom of the pipe was gradually replaced by debris, and a small liquid with an unknown stench flowed in the center of the pipe. George had a look of disgust on his face. He didn't understand why Lee Jordan would run into such a smelly place and put the alchemy coat on his head. When Louis fell down, they took off the hoods covering their heads to prevent the unlucky wizard from doing something drastic when he saw 3 aliens in spacesuits when he woke up. That's right. I was in such a hurry just now that I forgot to give you a protective coat. George stopped suddenly, reached into his large pocket and took out an alchemy jacket that was the size of a matchbox and exuded a light fragrance, and handed it to Louis. Chapter 62. What is this? It's not a condom, right? Louis asked curiously as he looked up and down at the matchbox-sized plastic product. This is an alchemical protective suit. It can block most smells and stains. What is the suit you are talking about? Is it a new magic tool from France? Well, Louis has a headache. How should he explain the function of the condom to a 12-year-old young wizard? Don't worry about what it is. Just teach me how to use the protective suit. If I stay here any longer, I suspect that I'm going to have a problem with my nose. Louis changed the subject and asked George to teach him how to use it. The alchemy props were similar to the magic protection ring on Louis' hand, and they all had a specific method of use. Unlocking the Marauder's map and potion notes requires corresponding spells, activating the teleportation array on the inheritance token requires magic power, and some require mental power to control. Just put it on you, and then input magic power into it, and it will automatically grow into clothes similar to your body shape. George explained, pointing to the matchbox in Louis' hand. After about 7 points of magic power, the protective clothing covered Louis' entire body, including his feet at the bottom of the pipe, and a thick protective film appeared on the soles of his feet. Let's go, Fred and Lee are still waiting for us. After Louis put on the protective clothing, George led him to continue moving along the marks. There was more and more sewage going in, occupying most of the center of the pipe. Louis and George had to step on the smelly and slippery sewage. There was a lot of black sludge accumulated at the bottom of the sewage. Through the sewage, you could see a few random lines of footprints on the sludge, which should have been stepped by Fred and Lee Jordan. In the distance, a flickering light appeared in George's eyes, and George looked happy. It seemed that he had found Fred. I just don't know if Fred has found Lee. I hope he does, so that he can go back to the dormitory to rest, George thought in his heart. The lights in the distance suddenly went out, and George was shocked. Could it be that Fred had an accident? Not long after, a white light came back on from the place where the light disappeared, making George's heart relax slightly, as long as nothing happened. Come on, George. There's danger behind you. Fred's voice came from the white light, which was the shining spell he cast with his wand. Fred, be careful. As soon as Lee Jordan finished speaking, Fred felt a chill in his heart. He subconsciously bent down, and a grey-black beam of light flew past his back, leaving a small depression on the pipe and then quickly disappeared. Fred was so frightened that he broke into cold sweat. If that thing had hit him, he would have died long ago. Time goes back to the moment when Fred found Lee Jordan. After chasing and escaping, they ran into a huge underground cave. Comparing the memories on the Marauder's map, Fred found that the makers did not mark the caves. Perhaps there were some taboos, or perhaps they did not explore this place. Fred was stunned when he saw the scene inside the cave. Several large sewage outlets continuously flowed out sewage into a huge septic tank-like pool in the center of the cave. Lee, come back with me, I'm sorry for lying to you during the introduction, me. I just wanted someone to provide funds for the event, I'm sorry my friend. Fred kept apologizing to a black figure, and the real Lee Jordan stood next to Fred, with black question marks on his face. Fred was blind, so why did he apologize to no one? Lee Jordan didn't understand. Could it be that he was embarrassed to apologize in front of him? It shouldn't be. Fred and George are two social terrorists. For them, apologizing in person is as easy as drinking water. Seeing that Lee Jordan didn't answer him, Fred, thinking that he hadn't forgiven him yet, took a few steps closer, intending to pull his friend back from the edge of the cesspool. What is Fred doing? Why did he walk towards the sewage pool? Wasn't he afraid of falling? Lee Jordan frowned. Fred's situation was similar to that of a person who was cursed by traditional African witch doctors. Fred was getting closer and closer to the cesspool. If he took a few steps forward, he would be able to pull up Lee Jordan. This should be a happy thing, but Fred was very resistant to this in his heart. A certain premonition reminded him that if he continued to move forward, he might die, and he would die miserably. The moment he pulled back, Fred fell into the cesspool. But from Fred's main perspective, the sewage pool was still more than 10 meters away from him, and the position where Lee Jordan stood was absolutely safe. Are you crazy, Fred? I'm here. Lee Jordan shouted, hoping to attract Fred's attention. As if sensing something, Lee in Fred's eyes began to approach the cesspool. In order to catch him, Fred rushed forward a few steps and came to the edge of the cesspool. In front is a sewage pool that is so turbid that you can't see what's under the water. Behind it is the safe land. Fred leaned forward slightly. He had a premonition that he might die if he moved forward. Wizards' premonitions were generally more effective, especially those with special talents. Take Grindelwald for example. His talent allows him to see the future for a short time. As a wizard and a prophet, he is definitely very popular to play werewolf. The guilt for his good friend outweighed the discomfort in his heart, and Fred opened his legs. The touch under his feet was not the solid ground, but the air and the water surface where some feces could be seen. At this time, Fred finally regained consciousness. Where was Lee Jordan in front of him? He was clearly a manta ray with a huge bulge on its head and a wide mouth. It is famous for its mental illusions. It often disguises itself as a drowned beauty or a mermaid on the water, inducing others to go into the water for rescue, and then uses its sharp teeth to tear the body of its prey into pieces. Fred, you're crazy. Lee Jordan uttered obscenities and took out his wand as quickly as he could. Come here, Fred. This was the first time Lee Jordan used the flying curse to summon a human. The moment he caught Fred, his magic power was reduced by nearly half. Then he pulled Fred up slowly and slowly consumed Lee Jordan's magic power. The prey in the mouth wants to fly away, but the manta ray naturally won't agree. The fish's tail hits the sewage, pushing its body upwards. Fred could see food residues from the open mouth, and could also see the excrement products from the little wizard in the castle between the sharp teeth. Get away, you ugly guy, Fred prayed silently in his heart. It was obviously too late to pull out the wand at this time. He could only pray that the manta ray wouldn't fly high enough to catch him. Flying to a height similar to Fred's, the giant mouth suddenly closed. Lee Jordan also used up the last bit of his magic power. The power of the flying spell weakened, and Fred's upward speed began to decrease. Chapter 63. Dying. Sorry George, I can't go with you in the future. All Fred could think about at the moment was George, how much he wanted to date George till the end of their lives. The sharp teeth pierced the protective suit, and wounds were already made in some places. Fred felt like he would be bitten into mincemeat at any time. Lee Jordan closed his eyes in annoyance. He didn't dare to look at the scene that happened next. If he hadn't lost his temper and ran to the sewage treatment center, the hub of the underground pipes, Fred would not have died. Fred kept his eyes open. He wanted to see more of the beautiful world. Of course, there was only a bloody mouth in front of him, and there was no world like the singing of birds and the fragrance of flowers in his imagination. At this moment, a tongue penetrated the manta ray from the bottom of the pool. Fred watched with his own eyes as the tongue protruded out of the manta ray's throat and arbitrarily pulled the manta ray into the water. The carrion poison dart frog, a 3-star magical animal from Africa, eats carrion, rotting plants, and even animal feces. When there is no food, it will fall into hibernation and come out again when there is enough food. 49 years ago, Hagrid accidentally pulled a poison dart frog into the toilet. It multiplied and multiplied in the sewage pool, and gradually became the strongest race in the sewage pool, dominating the entire sewage area. Except for a few magical animals that flowed into the sewage area from the Black Lake and a cruel snake, all other creatures were wiped out by the poison dart frogs. They also collected the excrement of the entire academy. Whenever the excrement is not enough for the group to eat, they will sneak into their nests to hibernate to avoid being eaten by cruel snakes. If Fred and Lee Jordan hadn't yelled so loudly, they might still be in hibernation. Holy shit! What the hell is that? Looking at the pile of frogs half as tall as a man with pimples on their bodies behind Fred and Lee Jordan, Louis felt a tingling sensation in his scalp. A half-human frog may not be scary, but a bunch of corpse poison dart frogs whose tongues are as fast as bullets. Sorry, I interrupted you. The 3 poison dart frogs at the front suddenly stopped moving, their big mouths bulging into a ball shape, and the terrifying sound of inhaling echoed in the pipe. The moment they opened their mouths, their grey-black tongues instantly spanned 30 meters, forming a T-shape to block the space for Lee Jordan to hide. Whoosh! 3 tongues returned to the poison dart frog's mouth with blood stains on them. 2 of them passed by Lee Jordan, leaving 2 black wounds on his arms. The bottom tongue pierced Lee Jordan's thigh, and if it moved a little further to the upper right, Lee Jordan was about to revise the Sunflower Book and move into the girls' dormitory. Are you okay, Lee? Before Lee Jordan's consciousness left his body and fell into coma, he seemed to hear Fred's shout. The poison dart frogs froze when they tasted the meaty taste. This was the first time they had eaten wizard meat since they were born. It was countless times more delicious than the wizard excrement they often eat. Because the pipe was too narrow, the poison dart frog army was forced to stop after the 3 of them stopped. The frogs went crazy and became angry. Dozens of tongues penetrated the bodies of the 3 poison dart frogs that were blocking the way, tearing them into different pieces. The piece of meat is brought back to the mouth. Take Lee and leave quickly. He has been poisoned. Go find the professor and save me. I will attract their attention and help you cut off the queen. Fred put Lee Jordan in George's hand, took out his wand and ran towards the poison dart frog army alone. By this time, the poison dart frogs had already dealt with the obstacles and were jumping to catch up. The poison dart frog jumps very fast. If no one stops it, only Louis among the 4 of them will make it back alive. Please, help us take Lee back. Before George could finish speaking, Louis ran past him on sewage, and ran towards the poison dart frog with Fred. George wanted to follow him and fight with his brother, even if they died together, but his reason told him that the most important thing to do at this time was to run back to the castle and bring the professor to rescue Fred and Louis before they died in battle. Them. Snap, 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 the sound of running came from behind, and Fred knew in his heart that it was probably George who came to help him. Go away, George, I am enough here. Although he really wanted to fight with George, in the doomed battle, Fred wanted George to survive, let him appreciate the world with the same eyes as his, and let him take care of his parents with the same body as his. There are many things Fred wants to do, and after he dies, he can only ask George to do it for him, so George can't die. At least you can't die here. Hey, why is it you, George? When Fred saw Louis, there was a look of astonishment on his face. Don't worry, George has gone back. Understanding Fred's worries about George, Louis explained. In the past life memory, Fred died in a battle with Death Eaters 8 years later, while George and Lee Jordan lived to the end of the novel. In other words, Fred in the original book never survived the battle, or they never encountered a group of poison dart frogs in the original book. If it was the former, it would be difficult for Fred to survive unless Dumbledore came to the rescue himself. With Lao Deng at his back, Louis will not be in danger if he stays to fight, and he can improve his combat experience. He can also brush up on Lao Deng's favor ability, so he can kill 3 birds with 1 stone. If it is the latter, and the army of poison dart frogs hunting Fred is the butterfly effect caused by Louis as a time traveler, then Louis will have to stay, and he will be responsible for the consequences he caused. You should go back with George. There is no need to accompany me to death. Louis smiled, reached into the pocket of his large wizard robe, actually grabbed the space bag hidden in the lining, took out 2 bottles of petrification potion, and handed one of them to Fred. Here, take this petrochemical potion from France. Drinking it may save your life at a critical moment. After speaking, Louis opened the cork and drank the ordinary petrochemical potion into his stomach. In addition to the petrification potion, there is also a bottle of antidote potion and powerful healing potion in his space bag. Considering that the wizard's robes could not hold much, and that Dumbledore was probably watching them secretly, Lewis did not take out the antidote. Thank you. If you can go back alive, you will be my best brother. Fred's face was slightly red. Apart from treating Lewis as a brother, he could not find any way to repay Lewis. For a stranger, he stayed and fought at the risk of being killed. If Fred were a girl, he would probably have to repay Lewis with his body. Haha, then you must not die. Lewis said with a smile, took out the dragon from the wand bag, and shifted his body's center of gravity slightly to prepare for battle. Chapter 64. The poison dart frog army is approaching, especially after Lewis drank the petrifying potion and his body smelled faintly of a basilisk. Smelling something similar to a big snake, they thought Lewis and Fred who drank the petrifying agent were baby snakes. The poison dart frogs, who wanted to kill their natural enemies, moved forward crazily with red eyes. The terrifying snakes in the tunnel eat dozens of poison dart frogs every year, and the three-headed snakes may be wiping out their tribe. All petrochemical. Fred took the lead. There were so many poison dart frogs that he almost didn't need to aim. The petrification spell instantly hit a poison dart frog jumping in front. The petrified poison dart frog fell to the ground, and two poison dart frogs immediately stepped on it and jumped from behind it, not caring that their companions were still alive. All petrochemical. 15 points of magic power were amplified by the dragon wand, and turned into a petrified beam of light that fell on the poison dart frog at the front. The poison dart frog was still 20 meters away from Lewis and the others. 20 meters is already the limit that the poison dart frog's tongue can reach under normal conditions. If it is further away, it is necessary to increase the attack distance of the tongue by accumulating power in advance. Lewis and Fred used petrification spells alternately, petrifying the corpse poison dart frog running at the front while moving their bodies back. Even so, the distance between the poison dart frogs and them was still decreasing. The only puzzling thing was that the poison dart frogs did not attack them, as if they were brewing some conspiracy. Lewis, I have no magic power, you have to be careful. Fred's voice came from the side. He had used the petrification spell 5 times in total. Except for the last time when the magic power was insufficient, the other 4 times he used the petrification spell were all standard powers. Another petrification ray flew out from the top of the wand. Lewis took the time to use a detection spell on himself. He still had 12 points of magic power, which was only enough to use a degraded version of the petrification spell. During the half-hour of searching for Lee Jordan, Lewis used unknown techniques to restore his magic power as he walked. It took him more than 10 minutes to restore his magic power from 17 to 87. If it weren't for the fact that nameless skills cannot be used in battle, meridians are needed to run the magic spell, and meridians are also needed to absorb the free magic power in the air. If the magic spell is used, the magic power cannot be restored, and Lewis' magic power reserves can be higher. I don't have much magic left. Lewis replied truthfully, and like Fred, he cast 5 petrification spells. Then what are you waiting for, run. Fred threw back a handful of alchemy products and shouted loudly, what are you doing here if you don't have any magic power? Are you going to hit poison dart frogs with your fists? The alchemy product Fred throws is called a decoy bomb. After being thrown out, it will flee around to attract other people's attention. Fred hopes that the poison dart frogs will focus on the bomb and allow them to escape successfully. If they didn't drink the petrifying potion and didn't smell of the basilisk on their bodies, they might have succeeded. Many poison dart frogs focused on the bombs that were moving around, thinking that they were new food. It's a pity that they smell of basilisk blood and exude the breath of basilisk. When faced with the survival of the race and the critical moment of life and death, the poison dart frogs chose the former. Even if they are hungry, they will kill the baby basilisk, and maybe they can eat a meal of basilisk meat by then. After Fred and Lewis turned around and ran away, the poison dart frogs opened their mouths, and 8 tongues emerged from the gaps in the frogs and flew towards the backs of Lewis and Fred. The moment the physical warning appeared, Lewis automatically opened the earth barrier. Fearing that the earth barrier alone was not safe enough, he used magic power to activate the ring on his hand, ready to activate the magic spell on it at any time. 5 tongues shot at Lewis, and only 3 tongues shot at Fred, who was running in front of Lewis. Whoosh whoosh! A huge force pushed on Lewis' back, pushing him forward more than 2 meters. Lewis still felt that his back hurt like a needle pricking him. He was definitely injured. The feeling at the wound quickly turned from pain to numbness, and then Louis felt that his back had no feeling, and the numbness spread from his back to his whole body step by step. Once the earth barrier expired, the numbness spread faster and faster, beginning to erode along the spinal nerves towards the brain. Louis quickly took out the antidote from the space bag. After taking 2 sips, the numbness improved. Except for his back, the rest of the area basically returned to normal. Fred fell not far in front of Louis, his head facing down, and his entire face was buried in the dirty water that was not too deep. Damn it, what should I do next? Leave Fred behind and run for your life, or stay and fight the poison dart frog with your body? Recalling the pus-oozing bulge on the body of the corpse poison dart frog, Louis immediately gave up his second thought. He didn't want to come into contact with the poison dart frog, which looked disgusting. Whoosh whoosh. Another series of sound broke through the air. Although Louis tried his best to avoid it, 2 tongues carrying viruses and excrement still scratched his skin. A feeling of dizziness came over him. Even if Louis drank all the antidote potion in his hand, he still felt dizzy and might collapse at any time. At the moment of crisis, the nameless technique automatically operated in his mind. Louis, who was dizzy, felt that he had encountered an invisible barrier. The barrier was already very thin and could be torn apart with a little force. Louis respected his true intention and tried it. The remaining 2 points of magic power turned into nails and drove them deeply into the barrier. The magic power guided by the nameless technique followed closely behind and turned into an invisible hammer and hit the nails to break the surface. Break through the barrier. Louis had 99 magic points more than a month ago. He was stuck on the bottleneck for more than a month, and the bottleneck was invisibly eliminated for more than a month. Even if there is no danger, Louis can break through to a second-level wizard in no more than 3 days. At the moment of breakthrough, countless magic powers poured into Louis' body, giving him the illusion that there was endless magic power. The biological instinct of the corpse poison dart frog reminds them that the momentum of the little basilisk is getting stronger, and 35 tongues fly out at the same time. Many of the tongues were crooked or hit their companions. The remaining 22 tongues all flew towards Louis. They wanted to kill the natural enemy before it became stronger. Damn, there's no need, bro, so many people will die. Louis is extremely scared now. He was still in the stage of magic infusion when he broke through. The magic in the natural environment suppressed him, making Louis unable to move his body. He could only watch a black tongue fly over. By the way, I still have the iron armor charm on the ring. Grasping the life-saving straw, Louis tried his best to mobilize his magic power. As long as he could mobilize a little magic power to pour into the ring, the magic spell on the ring would automatically take effect. Whether it was an iron armor curse or a barrier curse, he could survive. A trace of magic flowed to the surface of the ring under the pull of mental power, and 2 options came from the mental power. One was a powerful iron armor curse, and the other was a powerful obstacle curse. Chapter 65. To be on the safe side, Louis chose to activate both protection spells at the same time. The invisible armor formed by the iron armor curse adheres to the surface of the broken stone armor, and the powerful obstacle spell acts on the outside of the iron armor curse, acting as the first layer of protection. Pa, pa, pa. The tongue hit the barrier spell, making a crisp and loud sound, but it still failed to break through the invisible barrier formed by the powerful barrier spell. The first wave, the second wave, until the poison dart frogs stuck out their tongues for the 3rd time, they broke through the invisible barrier in front of Louis before the powerful barrier spell ended. Name, Louis Lestrange. Occupation, 2nd level wizard / intermediate potion master. Magic? /300, affected by unknown factors, the magic power in the body is connected to the pure magic power source in the breakthrough state, so the amount of magic power cannot be calculated. Talent, Earth Barrier. Talent description, standing on the ground, you can get the protection of the earth. Passive effect, reduce all status damage by 35%, immune to earth attribute magic damage. Active effect, consume 5 magic points per second, gain an additional 10% damage reduction, earth attribute magic affinity. Talent, Lestrange's Honor. Talent description, a gift from the ancient bloodline Lestrange. The purer the bloodline, the stronger the awakened talent will be. Talent effect, summon Raven, Raven incarnation. Talent 3, purple body, sealed. Magic power poured into Louis' body crazily, but the power that pressed him and prevented him from moving disappeared. The flames are coming. Singing the fireball spell softly, 20 points of magic power disappeared in the body at the moment the fireball was formed. However, with the continuous flow of pure magic power flowing into Louis' body, the 20 points of magic power consumed were quickly replenished. The fast-flying fireball collided with the grey-black tongue. The fireball exploded instantly, high-temperature sparks spread out, and the flames burned along the surface of the tongue toward the poison dart frog's body. Quack! 7 or 8 poison dart frogs cried out in pain, their tongues all injured by the flames. In good condition, there were large blisters on the surface, but at least the tongues were still intact. In bad condition, the tongues of the 2 poison dart frogs were completely burnt from the tip, and fell feebly into the sewage, trembling from time to time. If my magic power recovers so quickly, doesn't it mean that I can cast magic spells infinitely? The originally hateful poison dart frogs have become cute. Now they are the best curse test materials in Louis' eyes. They can test the power of the curse without worrying about hurting innocent lives. Louis wishes he could have as many poison dart frogs in front of him as possible. He still has a lot of attack spells to practice. Fireball, ground stabbing technique, the ice cone spell and the trap spell are all 4 spells that need to be practiced with the companionship of the cute poison dart frogs. The Sword of the Cliff. Spending points of magic power, Louis summoned a sharp stone pillar 10 meters away. The stone pillar was about 1 meter high, broke a small piece of pipe, and emerged from it. Damn it, he miscalculated the casting distance of ground sting. Louis originally wanted to use ground sting to attack the poison dart frog at the front, which was 12 meters away. His tongue was burned and he lay down in the water pretending to be dead. Without thinking, he summoned the ground thorn 2 meters away from the poison dart frog. According to the magic book, if you want to practice attack spells, you must have a living target to be attacked. No matter what kind of creature it is, as long as its vitality exceeds a certain upper limit, it can practice magic. In an era when offensive spells were prevalent, wizards used ordinary domestic animals or muggles to practice such magic. After the Muggle Expelling Curse and the Wizarding Secrecy Act were developed, attack spells that required the destruction of life were abandoned by white wizards and looked down upon by dark wizards, and were gradually replaced by light spells. Magic spells such as the Death Curse, the Petrification Curse, and the Sleeping Curse are all light-type magic spells. This type of magic spell has a characteristic, that is, it acts quickly. Unlike attack-type magic spells, it is easy to be avoided by nimble enemies. Silently calculating the distance between himself and the poison dart frog, Louis, who was protected by the iron armor curse, once again used the ground stab technique. A stone pillar rose into the sky, breaking through the poison dart frog's belly and carrying it into the air. Light red blood continued to flow down the stone pillar. Cool, the first time he used ground thorn technique to kill a life, Louis felt as comfortable as taking a great tonic. His understanding of ground thorn technique also increased little by little. After practicing the ground thorn technique for a while, the summoned ground thorns almost sealed the entire pipeline. If Louis could just take the opportunity to escape before breaking through, but now, he had to stay and practice with the poison dart frogs. So Louis switched to the ice pick technique and attacked the stone pillars on one side of the pipe, while the poison dart frogs attacked the stone pillars on the other end of the pipe. In the principal's office, Lao Deng, who was wearing pajamas, suddenly opened his eyes. As the wizard with the most profound magical attainments nearby, Dumbledore had already straightened out the magic network near Hogwarts during his time as principal of Hogwarts. The network structure that ancient wizards connected to each wizard and the original magic power of the world was called the Magic Network, or the Magic Network for short. Who is abusing the magic of the Magic Network? Could it be that Tom is back? Dumbledore frowned. Except for the legendary wizards, no one can use the Magic Network to draw magic power. There are only 4 legendary wizards he knows: Flamel, Laofu, Grindelwald and Dumbledore himself. Flamel did not tell Dumbledore in advance that he would not go to Hogwarts rashly. Grindelwald was imprisoned in New Mongard. Apart from the 2 of them, only Voldemort could directly mobilize the magic network. After closing his eyes and sensing it, Dumbledore found that the magic power mobilized by the magic network was very scarce. Compared with the magic power required by the legendary wizard to cast magic, it was simply a drop in the bucket. If it's not a legendary wizard, is someone in the academy making a breakthrough? Dumbledore was instantly interested. He had seen somewhere in Flamel that only talented wizards who broke through could have the opportunity to connect with the magic network and mobilize the magic power of the magic network at will. The wizard consciousness allowed them to experience the feeling of becoming a legendary wizard in advance. If a legendary wizard who is not a secret keeper can be cultivated, he might be able to complete that task. While thinking about it, Dumbledore used his spirit to communicate with the magic network, and followed the magic network to the edge of the tunnel. It turns out to be him, a transfer student from France. I hope Flamel hasn't discovered him yet, Dumbledore prayed silently in his mind. Lewis, who was condensing the fireball technique, felt like he was being watched. The fireball that was about to be formed wavered a few times, and he quickly turned his mind back to the fireball technique. It would be bad if the fireball exploded in his hand. The powerful iron armor spell on his body had expired. Lewis definitely didn't want to use his body to resist the flames that reached 1,000 degrees. Controlling the fireball to fly towards a poison dart frog that was still moving, and giving it a set of explosive grilled meals, Lewis stopped casting spells and looked around at the pipes around him, trying to find the source of the peeping feeling. Chapter 66. The little guy's perception ability is pretty good. Dumbledore nodded secretly, and he could actually sense his attention. His perception was stronger than that of some Auror-level wizards. After looking at it suspiciously for a while, and making sure that there were no wizards around to observe, Lewis picked up the wand again. The source of magic power that blessed him was about to disappear, and the speed of restoring magic power was more than twice as slow as at the beginning. Lewis planned to take advantage of the last opportunity to use the greasy fire sea technique that he had been talking about for a long time. First, use the grease spell to summon a piece of grease. The light yellow grease floats on the surface of the sewage, and flows downstream with the sewage to the poison dart frog corpses. Countless poison dart frogs were pinned to stone pillars, killed by ice picks, and burned to black charcoal. Lewis hunted 37 poison dart frogs at one time. The corpse completely blocked the narrow pipe. Except for the water flowing through the gaps between the corpses, neither Lewis nor the pile of poison dart frogs behind the corpse could cross the poison dart frog corpse. Grease technique, grease technique, grease technique. 3 grease spells were cast in a row, and light yellow grease spread all over the surface of the pipe. It was flammable grease modified by the wizard, and it can burn at only 100 degrees. The oil followed the water flow to the corpses of the poison dart frogs, as well as the poison dart frogs behind them. There were even a few corpse poison dart frogs that opened their mouths and swallowed the oil mixed with the blood of their companions. The flames are coming. Lewis pulled Fred back a few steps, and he put the unconscious Fred next to his legs. As soon as the high-temperature fireball left his body, Lewis immediately put away his wand, put Fred on his shoulders, and prepared to run away with him. Does Fred still have poison dart frogs? Who brought this thing into Hogwarts? Don't you know how harmful they are? Wait, Dumbledore suddenly thought of a possibility. It couldn't be Hagrid. Hagrid had a criminal record, and Aragog, the Acromantula, was still wreaking havoc in the Forbidden Forest. Speaking of Hagrid and Dumbledore, I have a bit of a headache. Although he has the talent of animal affinity, he doesn't use the talent in formal channels. He just wants to raise some cuties all day long. Hagrid's own definition of a cute little creature is just a cute creature that cannot kill a hybrid giant with extremely high magic resistance, but can easily kill a young wizard or even an adult wizard. The connection between Lewis and the magic network was interrupted, and Dumbledore, who borrowed a trace of his spirit from the magic network, returned to the principal's office to tell the main body what he had seen. The grease ignited instantly, and the hot flames spread instantly along the grease on the water to the back of the corpse. The poison dart frogs that drank the grease became the first victims. The flames spread all the way down the tongue and were burned by the specialized oil they drank, allowing them to experience an internal and external feeling. Lewis, who ran to a safe area, turned back and admired the beautiful scenery he had created. The light of the fire was much brighter than the oil lamp in his hand. He could see clearly what was going on in the pipe without the oil lamp. The black pipes and the orange-red firelight are in sharp contrast. The most attractive thing is the 2 precious gems that exude a light green color in the center of the firelight. Lewis just glanced at it and felt a creepy feeling. Wait, where did the gems come from in the tunnel? A chill swept through Lewis' body. Couldn't those be a pair of eyes? The eyes rotated back and forth around the edge of the fire, and it could be seen that it wanted to come to Lewis very much. Out of fear of the flames, it never dared to cross the sea of fire. Depend on, it couldn't be a basilisk. I just looked at it. It couldn't be killed by the basilisk's instant death magic. Lewis was so frightened that he swallowed hard, and he thought it was better to leave first. Hiss. The basilisk spit out the snake letter anxiously, and finally met a wizard who met the master's rules. It wanted Lewis to have access to the master's secret room, and it would be best to get the master's inheritance there. Unfortunately, the temperature of the flame was too high. Even if it was walking at the end of the army, it could still feel a wave of heat. It couldn't imagine what would happen if it broke into the sea of fire. Hoo ho ho! Professor McGonagall, hurry up, Fred and Lewis are in danger in the underground pipes. After George placed Lee Jordan at the intersection of pipelines, he climbed up alone along the rope to find rescue. The longer he delayed, the greater the probability that Lewis and Fred would die. Take me there, Professor McGonagall said calmly. Not long ago, she was wandering in the auditorium, intending to catch some Gryffindor students who were out for a night out. Until Professor McGonagall received news from Phoenix that there was a student in the corridor outside the boys' bathroom on the second floor of the castle who needed your help. Professor McGonagall's good mood was instantly ruined. How could a little wizard explore underground pipes? Isn't it dirty everywhere? Before entering the sewage pipe, Professor McGonagall cast several layers of cleaning spells on herself to ensure that no dirt would fall on her wizard robes. Lee Jordan lay on his side on the ground, his body shaking from time to time, indicating that he was still alive. Professor McGonagall frowned slightly, fed Lee Jordan a few mouthfuls of the antidote potion, and after settling him, Professor McGonagall suppressed her dissatisfaction, urged George to walk faster, and trotted towards the place where Lewis and Fred were fighting. She doesn't like underground pipes, whether in cat form or human form. Professor McGonagall doesn't like the dirty environment in underground pipes. But for the sake of his students, Professor McGonagall would rather get dirty than let them lose their young lives. When they ran to the first fork in the road, Lewis' figure walked up to them. Fred was held behind by Lewis. His hands turned purple and hung down helplessly. He looked almost dead. Lewis, where's Fred? Is he okay? George's first sentence was to ask his brother Fred. Due to the lack of light in the tunnel, he did not notice Fred's hands hanging on both sides of Lewis. It's on my back. He was poisoned just like Lee Jordan. Lewis illuminated Fred's purple face with an oil lamp, which made George feel relieved. The moment he saw Lewis, George thought Fred had died. Let's talk about old times later. Bring Fred here. His condition is very bad. I want to take him and Lee to the school hospital together. Oh my god, did they go to fight in the cesspool? After taking a look at the light yellow Yanita cow on Fred's body, Professor McGonagall returned her gaze to Lewis. She felt that she might go blind if she continued to look at it. Not wanting to touch the dirty Fred with his hands, Professor McGonagall could only recite the levitating spell and carry Fred towards the joint of the pipes. Lewis and George walked behind muttering quietly. How did you survive with so many poison dart frogs? George asked curiously. Lewis shook his head. He was not going to tell the reason why he and Fred survived. There were too many secrets related to him. The first thing he did when he returned to Hogwarts was to take a shower. The tattered protective clothing was thrown aside. After washing away the dirt on his body, Lewis went to the school infirmary for treatment. He has also been injured several times by poison dart frogs. If he is not dealt with properly, Lewis is afraid of the impact on his future life. Your condition is milder than theirs. Just drink the medicine and sleep in bed. You'll be fine tomorrow. Madame Pomfrey pointed to the two mummies on the hospital bed. Chapter 67. Welcome to the Hospital Bed Alliance, my dear brother. Fred's voice came from one of the mummies. He struggled to sit up from the bed and opened his hands to give Lewis a hug. Oh my god! Lie back down, Fred, don't let the medicine loose on you. Madame Pomfrey shouted. Fred and Lee Jordan had been poisoned for too long, and the poison of the poison dart frogs spread throughout their bodies, and they needed to use plasters to remove the poison from the body surface. Sorry, Madame Pomfrey. Fred smiled and carefully lay back on the hospital bed. Madame Pomfrey is a very kind witch. When she is not angry, she is an angel in white. When she is angry, she is a demon from hell. For a problem that could be solved by drinking a bottle of magic potion, she had to use traditional methods to treat it. During the process, she mixed in various small methods to make people want to die. Moreover, Madame Pomfrey is extremely petty. If you make her angry once, she will remember you for a long time and take revenge the next time you seek medical attention. You too, be careful not to lose the medicine on your body when you go to bed at night, otherwise. Madame Pomfrey looked murderous, you know the consequences. The threatening look in her eyes made Fred and Lee Jordan shudder. We get it, Madame Pomfrey. They both said very obediently. That's good. Oh, it's almost 11 o'clock. I have to go to my beauty sleep. Remember to lie down and don't move around. After saying that, Madame Pomfrey walked to the small room on the side, which was her residence at Hogwarts. You can't even move while sleeping. Madame Pomfrey is too harsh. Fred complained softly. Lee Jordan nodded in agreement. He also felt that Madame Pomfrey's order was too unreasonable. Then Lee Jordan looked at Louis. Thank you for saving Fred. From now on, I owe you a favor. Me too. George's voice came from outside the door. He had just been dragged away by Professor McGonagall and scolded him. In order to punish them, Professor McGonagall also deducted 150 Gryffindor house points and each of the three deducted 50 points. At first, Professor McGonagall wanted to deduct Ravenclaw's points, but after George's hard explanation, he learned that Louis was trapped in the pipe by them, took the initiative to cut off the back and rescued Fred safely. Professor McGonagall not only did not deduct Ravenclaw's points, but also added 80 points to Ravenclaw House. One day later, the emerald hourglass belonging to Ravenclaw House rose again. No, no. Louis quickly waved his hand and refused. We are all friends, and it is what a friend should do if I stay to help. Even though Louis wanted to agree in his heart, his words turned into a humble rejection before he even left his mouth. Because Louis understands that verbal favors are useless. They promise well with words, but it is difficult to say when they actually ask them to help. Tapa. Madame Pomfrey suddenly opened the door. Wearing pink pajamas, she smiled and looked very kind. Are you guys suffering from insomnia? Do you need me to help you fall asleep painlessly? The four people in the school doctor's room shook their heads quickly. They were frightened by the giant mace behind Madame Pomfrey and fell asleep without pain. I'm afraid it will be a painless burial. Then just sleep quietly. You two can go back if you have nothing to do. There is no bed for you in the school doctor's office. Louis and George quickly slipped out of the infirmary, leaving Fred and Lee Jordan to bear the wrath of Madame Pomfrey alone. Madame Pomfrey is too scary. George complained softly after walking for a long time to ensure that the sound would not reach Madame Pomfrey's ears. It's probably because of menopause. When a witch reaches a certain age, she becomes short-tempered and easily angry. Afraid that George would not understand, Louis simplified the definition of menopause in his previous life and explained it again. Yes, she must have reached menopause. And Professor McGonagall, I suspect she has reached menopause too. Are you talking about me? George. An angry voice sounded from the side, and George tilted his head mechanically. Professor McGonagall stood not far behind them, looking at George as if he wanted to eat him alive. Help! George looked at Louis with pleading eyes, and Louis gave him a helpless expression. Oh my God, why is Professor McGonagall behind us? Judging by the look on her face, he must have heard everything. He said bad things about her in front of her, and that's it. George wailed in his heart, thinking that he would probably die miserably. Professor Dumbledore wants to see you. He wants to talk to you for a while. Come with me, Louis. After saying that, Professor McGonagall glared at George fiercely, turned and walked to the principal's office on the top floor of the castle. Dumbledore wants to see me, what kind of plan is this old bee planning? Could it be that he discovered my identity? Walking behind Professor McGonagall, a terrible thought flashed through Louis' mind. If Dumbledore wanted to kill him, Louis thought for a long time about what he could do. In fact, the moment the question arose, Louis already had the answer in his heart, that is, he could not resist and allowed Dumbledore to kill him. Keeping thinking about the door of the principal's office, Louis didn't think of any other possibility. Command to enter. ZZ Honey Candy. Professor McGonagall's face turned slightly red. The password Dumbledore had set was really shameful, comparable to his terrible clothes. I still have to inspect the campus, so I won't accompany you in. Professor Dumbledore is waiting for you inside. You can go in by yourself. The door to the principal's office slowly opened. Louis hesitated outside the door for a while, and after sorting out the important memories in his mind, he stepped into the principal's office. There are many desserts piled in the tall principal's room, and magical portraits of past principals are hung on 2 walls. Dumbledore will also become one of the portraits after his death. Dumbledore was sitting in the deepest part of the principal's office. Just like when Louis first met Grindelwald, Old B was sitting on the office chair with his eyes closed and thinking. The door behind him slowly closed, and only Louis and Dumbledore were left in the huge principal's room. A force as gentle as a breeze acted on Louis. If he hadn't practiced the brain occluder curse, he would have personally experienced the feeling of being possessed by others. Louis may still be in the dark, thinking that Dumbledore is asleep and unaware that he is using legilimency to browse the secrets in his mind. The brain occluder curse reached its limit, and the consciousness built pyramids one after another in the memory. Without exception, Dumbledore saw through all of them. Old Deng saw many important memories in the process. Chapter 68. Compared with Lewis, Dumbledore seemed extremely relaxed. Lewis might have been able to last longer using other memory preservation methods, but he used Grindelwald's pyramid method. Sorry, Dumbledore is too familiar with this. When he was with Grindelwald, he often absorbed Grindelwald's thoughts, fought against the pyramid method countless times, and had already figured out a mature solution. There's something wrong with his memory, Dumbledore frowned slightly. In addition to the pyramid method, there was also a force blocking Lewis' memory. Dumbledore browsed for a long time, but could not find any memory of Lewis before he was 8.5 years old, especially the memories related to Lewis' parents, all of which were protected by mysterious energy. Give him some time, Dumbledore might be able to decipher the source of the mysterious power and get Lewis' memories from before he was 8.5 years old, but now. Professor Dumbledore, how long do you want to watch? Lewis roared angrily after the memory pyramid was defeated again. Sorry, Mr. Lewis Lestrange, I'm just curious about your origins. Dumbledore said with a smile, putting aside Lewis' memories from before he was 8.5 years old. Dumbledore had already gotten everything he wanted from Lewis' sea of memories. Lewis' identity also includes his relationship with the Secret Keepers, the next generation of Secret Keepers, and the next generation leader of the Grindelwald army. Maybe add the next generation of Hogwarts headmasters, Dumbledore smiled to himself. Then what are you going to do? Lewis was panicking now. He was afraid that Dumbledore would see the memories of his previous life and know the identity and system of his time traveler. After entering the school, Lewis had avoided meeting Dumbledore. Even if he did, it would be when there were many people. For no other reason than to fear that he would use legilimency to explore his memory. He didn't expect that Dumbledore would actually summon him and ask Professor McGonagall to take him there. He couldn't refuse Lewis even if he wanted to. What do I want to do? Since you have listened to the story of Flamel and Grindelwald, are you interested in hearing me tell about the history of that period? Dumbledore was curious. He didn't see Lewis' speculation about him, that is, Dumbledore's conspiracy theory, and he had a high favorability towards Lewis. All memories related to the system or previous lives are protected by the system. Please tell me, I'm very interested. Louis is like playing a jigsaw puzzle, getting the main body of the puzzle from Nick Flamel, the main body of the early 20th century. Then Grindelwald completed part of it. Now he will get the last piece of the puzzle from Lao Deng and successfully obtain all the content of that period. Let me start with Ariana. After her death, I wandered around the world, hoping to use asceticism to escape the pain in my heart. Lao Deng scratched his head with his hands when he mentioned his sister. Even now, he can't let go of the fact that Ariana is dead. The world calls him the greatest white wizard, but they don't know that during his travels, he killed several boys who had bullied Ariana, including those boys' families who became targets of Dumbledore's revenge. In 1924, I returned to Grindelwald. At that time, we were as happy as two children, spending all day together. It wasn't until 73 days later that I discovered the death altar in the Grindelwald military camp. A ritual used by some wizards to worship the god of death. It turns out that this is the case. After discovering the altar of death, Lao Deng ran away. Does this count as completing Grindelwald's mission? If so, wouldn't it mean that he could drop out of school tonight and have someone pick him up and take him back to France tomorrow? Although he couldn't let go of Chuzhong, Professor Sprout's herbal room, and his friends in the college, Lewis still wanted to leave Hogwarts. In the next 7 years, Lao Fu will jump out and cause trouble. Instead of getting involved, it is better to withdraw in time and return to France to degenerate. It was then that I realized that Grindelwald's army had long been corroded by the god of death, and the degree of erosion was still very high. At least one undercover agent had made it to the top. In the next few days, I concentrated on thinking about the purpose of the Grindelwald army's operations. Many barcodes may look okay, but when used, they will subtly change the thinking of the coalition forces. Are the coalition forces that don't have the goal of conquering the god of death still a coalition force? Are the coalition forces that attack the magic world still a coalition force? Those two questions have been lingering in my mind until the day I couldn't bear it anymore, and I quietly left. All Grindelwald wanted was an explanation. Based on the relationship between him and Dumbledore, Lewis guessed that as long as Dumbledore gave him an explanation, no matter how outrageous it was, Grindelwald would accept it. You have already heard about what happened after that. Let me tell you what happened in 1945. If Lao Deng narrated it himself, it was probably about the details of the battle. Louis was full of expectations for this. He might be able to learn a lot from the details of the battle between the two legendary wizards. At that time, there was a student in the academy named Tom Riddle. One day he opened Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets and obtained many manuscripts left by Slytherin. Beyond Louis' expectations, Dumbledore told the story of what happened when Voldemort was in the academy. Tom was already a third-level wizard at that time, and I also got a lot of Slytherin's manuscripts when I rescued him. It's a pity that I was busy fighting against Grindelwald during that time, alas. Dumbledore sighed. If he had cared more about Tom and supervised Tom to prevent him from going astray, Voldemort would not have appeared, and everything that happened subsequently would not have happened. When I defeated Grindelwald and started to deal with the affairs in the academy, Tom was about to graduate. After graduation, he went to Romania to study Slytherin's manuscript in depth and contact death from the manuscript or other places. Tom's magic began to improve by leaps and bounds. When he graduated, he was only a 4th level, or level, wizard. More than 2 years later, he became a 6th level, epic, wizard, far beyond the students of the same generation. Every increase in strength comes at a price. I smell a big smell of death from Tom. After Tom dies, his soul will become the property of death and help death regain its strength. Dumbledore said admonishingly that he was afraid that Louis would also follow the path of Voldemort, overdrawing his future potential and the excitement after death in order to enjoy his combat power in advance. I immediately rejected Tom's request to be a teacher, and wanted to help him get in touch with the shackles of death, but I didn't want my magic power to fall on the energy of death and not have the intended effect at all. Chapter 69. Tom, come to me. Tom Riddle hesitated for a while, then walked to Dumbledore's side very obediently. To a large extent, Dumbledore acted as his father. Tom, who had lived in an orphanage since he was a child, longed for someone to rescue him from the orphanage. Dumbledore appeared, and when Tom was 11 years old, he took him out of the hellish orphanage and came to the mysterious magical world. All petrochemical. I called Tom to my side, and when he wasn't paying attention, I used a petrifying spell to immobilize Tom. I will never forget his expression at that time. He was filled with regret, disappointment, and more importantly, despair. He trusted me so much, but he was despicably betrayed by me. I'm sorry, I lost my composure. Dumbledore had tears in his eyes, and then he did more things to feel sorry for Tom. Dumbledore pulled Tom out of hell and kicked him into a more painful and desperate hell with his own hands. In order to save him, I borrowed many biographies of the ancestors of the secret keepers from Flamel. When Her Majesty Rowena Ravenclaw was young, she used the Imperious Curse to save a similar wizard. Rowena Ravenclaw, the most talented wizard in modern times, might have been able to break through to the realm of the Witch King and become the backbone of the wizarding world in the ancient times when the inheritance had not been cut off. I spent more than half a month carefully studying the entire process of Her Majesty Ravenclaw's rescue of wizards, and then... Dumbledore's voice began to tremble, he closed his eyes and said slowly. I used the Imperious Curse on Tom, and the kid looked at me numbly, watching me experimenting with the curse on him, treating him as a guinea pig for experimenting with the curse. CO author 2 generations of Dark Lords were caused by you, right? Louis wanted to complain. No matter what spell I use, it will not cause damage to the energy of death. On the contrary, other wizards. Dumbledore slowly stopped. What happened next was too dark and he didn't want Louis to know. Dumbledore used the Imperious Curse to control other wizards, whether they were first-year students or other professors in Hogwarts. When the death energy faced their curses, they would react more or less in a certain way. I have been experimenting on Tom for a long time and have come to a terrible conclusion. The most important breakthrough secret method in the Secret Keeper's inheritance may have a problem. Dumbledore suddenly raised his head, stared at Louis, and said again after looking at him for a long time. Before I find the problem, I hope you will not come into contact with the secret method of breakthrough. Grindelwald and I have become useless in front of the God of Death, but you still have a chance. You need to complete the mission of defeating the God of Death. This, Louis was confused by what the three of them were saying. When he only listened to Flamel's version, he thought Grindelwald was a bad guy who led the coalition astray. After hearing Grindelwald's version of the secret history, Louis felt that Dumbledore was a bad guy, and the Dumbledore conspiracy theory was born. After hearing Dumbledore's story, the suspicion shifted away from Lao Deng and pointed at the alien creature death sealed deep underground. Since you found out so much information, why did you imprison Grindelwald? Why didn't you tell Mr. Flamel the information? Work with Grindelwald to eradicate spies and cleanse Grindelwald's army, or ask Mr. Flamel to study loopholes in the arcana. Lewis didn't understand why Dumbledore couldn't think of a solution even he could think of. For love. For the people I love and the people who love me. Dumbledore replied with a smile. His white beard kept trembling with his smile. It was obvious that he was very happy now. LeMay is already very old. Although the elixir of life has allowed him to live for more than 600 years, his body and soul have long reached their limits. He longs for someone to take over his responsibilities and allow him to die in peace. The images of his master and his wife came to mind. They were similar in appearance to Dumbledore. They looked very strong and could live for several decades more. But if you compare their eyes carefully, you will find that Dumbledore's eyes are clearer and brighter, exuding vitality, while the Flamel couple's eyes are mixed with a sense of death, and you can still see the tiredness in their eyes from time to time. As for Grindelwald, I just want him to live. As he spoke, Dumbledore's eyes showed deep love. Okay. I understand, you don't need to talk anymore. Lewis said quickly. He didn't want to hear the love story between Lao Deng and Grindelwald. It's okay to be fed dog food by the young couple in the college. After all, they are still young and their hormones are strong. How about eating dog food from two old men? Sorry, I can't accept it. Dumbledore grunted regretfully, and after personally sending Grindelwald to prison, Lewis was the best listener Dumbledore had ever encountered in the past 45 years. In front of Lewis, he could tell a lot about death and Grindelwald's secrets, so he ignored Lewis' objection and continued to talk. At that time, anti-war sentiment was raging in the wizarding world, and there were high-level undercover agents within the coalition. Even if he was a powerful legendary wizard, he might have died in a trap set by the undercover. Legendary wizards are still in the human realm. Although they are immune to magic damage below level 5, they will also die if they are hit by a powerful spell. In order to protect him and keep him alive, I can only choose to defeat him with my own hands and send him to Nurmengard. Using the Blood Oath as a foundation, I built a magic circle to trap Grindelwald. By the way, you know what a Blood Oath is, right? It's an oath made by two people with love and blood. Seeing the depressed expression on Lewis' face, as if he had eaten dog shit, Dumbledore became more and more enthusiastic as he talked. He spent several minutes describing his feelings after making a blood oath with Grindelwald. Connected by blood and connected by heart, when the other party is in danger, he can get his spatial coordinates and use the apparition spell to teleport to him. Professor Dumbledore, I already know about your grudges with them. Next, I want to submit a transfer application to you and return to Beauxbatons to continue my studies. Dumbledore smiled. No, child, I will not let you go back. Why? Lewis clasped his hands and locked his eyes on Dumbledore's face. He needed an explanation. I just forgot to mention that, Tom completely sold his soul to death. Using the power he borrowed from death, he broke free from the shackles I left and quietly escaped from the castle. The last wizard to completely sell his soul to death was the ancient Greek wizard Despicable Herbo. He obtained the knowledge of Horcruxes from the god of death and used the power of the god of death to create several Horcruxes. It is said that he is still alive to this day, secretly planning the entire wizarding world for the god of death. Chapter 70. When he reappeared, he broke through and became a legendary wizard. As the Dark Lord Voldemort, he wreaked havoc on the entire British wizarding world, and finally died at the hands of a boy named Harry Potter. Sure enough, you want me to deal with Lao Fu? I shouldn't have come to Hogwarts, damn, Lewis cursed in his heart. In the memory of his previous life, Voldemort was called a rural terrorist by netizens, and his scope of influence was limited to the British Isles. But in this life, Lao Fu's strength has obviously improved significantly. He is the youngest legendary wizard in the world, and there is a god of death behind him. It's much stronger than the useless Voldemort in the original book, who was blocked by Harry Potter with a disarming curse for a long time. But he will be back soon. As the next generation of secret keepers, I hope you will confront Voldemort several times and learn how to fight against the forces of death during the battle. There was another more important reason why he didn't tell Lewis that he couldn't defeat Voldemort, let alone kill him. Lewis immediately lowered his face. Are you looking too high on me? My biggest wish is to inherit the family business and be a useless wizard waiting to die. Let Harry Potter be the hero. The plot of Harry Potter's first 3 years of school is relatively safe. The Philosopher's Stone faces the remnant soul of Voldemort, the Chamber of Secrets faces Tom's Horcrux and the Basilisk from school, and the prisoners of Azkaban are not dangerous either. As for the next 4 years, it can only be said that each year becomes more dangerous. Lao Fu was reborn in the Triwizard Tournament, the Death Eaters reappeared in the 5th year and Dumbledore was seriously injured in a conspiracy. At this time, the British wizarding world was still calm. Voldemort was secretly accumulating strength and had not yet opened his claws to the wizarding world. Lewis was already in 7th grade. In the 6th and 7th year, he could return to his country and make a fool of himself. On second thought, there seemed to be no danger in the first 5 years, as long as he doesn't seek death and takes the initiative to participate in the Triwizard Tournament, staying in Hogwarts for 5 years seems not bad. It's very late. You have to go to class tomorrow. I'll ask Forbes to take you back. Dumbledore pretended to be about to fall asleep, and without giving Lewis a chance to defend himself, he waved his hand to Phoenix Fox to teleport Lewis back to his room. I'm not decadent yet. What qualifications do you, a teenager, have to talk about decadence? After seeing Lewis off, Dumbledore thought in his heart. Damn it, old bee, curse the weird beans that taste like boogers when you eat candy. Lewis stood in front of the lounge door and cursed loudly. Fortunately, the soundproofing function of the lounge was good, otherwise his voice would probably wake up a few little wizards who were sleeping lightly. After answering the question on the bronze door eagle, Lewis walked into the lounge. As usual, Ms. Gray hid behind the statue and secretly observed Lewis. Ms. Gray would only meet Lewis after she observed him for a while to confirm that Lewis' character was not like Tom's, who liked to betray others. Lying on the bed, various scenes from the war came to his mind. Tonight was the most refreshing time for him to use magic. He had nearly endless magic power that he could consume at will. 2 talents are fully opened, affinity with the earth element, incarnation as a crow, new training techniques, and 1 reward opportunity that has not been claimed. The strength after the breakthrough can only be described as a world of difference compared to what he was before the breakthrough. Lewis felt that he was 10 times stronger than before the breakthrough. With a sudden movement of consciousness, he came under the big carousel and turned the reward carousel. Lewis watched expectantly as the reward carousel slowly stopped and the pointer reached a blue area. Fountain of Life, every 10 points of magic power consumed can condense a drop of Spring of Life. The Spring of Life contains a large amount of vitality and can restore injuries on the body. It's a auxiliary skill, but it's a pity that it can't be used to restore magic power, Lewis thought regretfully. To restore vitality, magic potions can be used instead, and the practical effect of the Fountain of Life will be greatly reduced. What's going on? How come Gryffindor's points have been deducted by more than half? And Ravenclaw, how come their points have increased a lot? A little lion who got up early shouted loudly after seeing the hourglass in the auditorium, attracting the attention of a bunch of little wizards. Check quickly. The person in that dormitory did not return to the dormitory last night, or came back late. Come forward and prove that you have nothing to do with the deduction of points. The little lions who got up early made a loud noise, and a few little wizards who came back late quickly stood up and repeated what they had done last night. 150 points. They haven't accumulated that many points since the beginning of the year. Each college is basically divided into 200 points at the beginning of the school year. As long as more than 500 points are accumulated in one academic year, the college cup will basically belong to that college. Now, Ravenclaw has a total of 383 points, which is almost 4 times the current score of Gryffindor. If the Eagles work harder, they may be able to win the Academy Cup. I know. George and his 3 roommates suddenly raised their hands and stammered. George came back very late last night. He didn't go back to bed until about 11 o'clock. Then Fred and Lee never returned to the dormitory. It turns out it's the 3 of them. Alas, all they do is make trouble all day long, and they almost deducted all their college points. Yes, they can't be undercover agents from Slytherin House. Where is poor George now? One of the protagonists of The Voice. He was in Professor McGonagall's office. Professor McGonagall called George over as soon as he got up. After a good training, Professor McGonagall, who felt unsatisfied, had a plan in his mind. You go down first. George ran out of the professor's office as if he had been granted amnesty. He thought Professor McGonagall was finally over his anger, but he didn't know that there were still many good things waiting for him. Professor Flitwick, I would like to switch classes with you. Professor Sprout, I want to change a class with you. Professor McGonagall walked into one professor's office after another and exchanged lessons with them. She was going to give an open class on the transfiguration spell, the kind that most wizards in the college would attend. What did you do last night? You deducted so many college points. As soon as George arrived in the cafeteria, an angry little lion jumped out and roared. Is it only 150 points? Haha, our adventure last night can't be compared with just 150 points. What do you think? Do you want to hear it? The wizards in the auditorium nodded in unison, and even the angry little lions nodded. They were angry, and the adventure stories in George's mouth were still very attractive. Ahem. George cleared his throat and said under the expectant eyes of the students. We went exploring the underground pipes last night. You should know about the underground pipes. They are the sewage pipes that handle all the dirty things in Hogwarts. Lewis and I followed the trace and ran to a tunnel. At this moment, Fred and the others ran towards us from the end of the pipe. Do you want to know why? Because they were followed by a large group of corpse poison dart frogs. With George's fluent eloquence, the story became popular throughout Hogwarts in no time. The four little wizards in the story, especially Lewis, who became famous just yesterday, instantly became the hottest topic in Hogwarts. Chapter 71. George's storytelling level is much better than that of the Ravenclaw prefect, especially the part after Lewis left a break. He described Lewis as a tragic hero in ancient Greek epics, which made several sentimental witches cry. Good morning, Brother Lewis. The moment he saw Lewis in the Ravenclaw lounge, Chu Jong happily ran to him. Good morning. Sorry to keep you waiting for so long. Lewis smiled and touched Chu Zhang's head. He went to bed too late last night and naturally got up late in the morning. Except for Chu Jong who was waiting for him, there was no one in the lounge. It didn't take long, I just got up. Chu Zhang's eyes were wandering. She had gotten up long ago and waited in the lounge for more than an hour before Lewis came out. Well, let's go eat. Along the way, Lewis recounted the adventure of the night before and explained the reason for his late rise. So that's it. It's such a pity that I didn't go on an adventure with you. Lewis smiled. The smell in the underground pipes alone was enough to persuade Chu Jong to quit. The great hero of Ravenclaw is here. The Ravenclaw wizards still in the auditorium cheered. Lewis has scored 100 points in the past 2 days, which is more than all the wizards in the academy combined. The Eaglets, who have never been interested in the House Cup, are actually too weak to win over Slytherin House. With strong enthusiasm bursting out for the first time, the Eaglets were gearing up to answer more questions in class and welcome the House Cup back to Ravenclaw House. Unfortunately, a sudden news interrupted their enthusiasm for points. Professor McGonagall is going to hold open classes on the Quidditch pitch, and all students can go and listen to her lectures. Even if there are classes in the morning, don't worry, Professor McGonagall has already discussed it with other professors. Except for the ghost Professor Binns who teaches the history of magic, other professors have said that you can use the class as you like, as long as you control the little wizards and don't let them run around at will. George, who was walking in the middle of the crowd, suddenly sneezed. For some reason, he had a bad feeling. Hey, how can we take this road? Don't we take this morning class? George looked at the road to the Quidditch pitch and became more and more uneasy. Don't you know? Professor McGonagall is giving a public class today, and all students can go to class. Professor McGonagall. George was stunned. He felt a big word danger written on his forehead. My stomach feels uncomfortable. I'll go to the school doctor's office to see Fred first. Please help me ask for leave. Just as George was about to walk away, Wood suddenly walked in front of him, with a very cautious smile on his face. Where do you want to go? Professor McGonagall specifically asked us to take you there. In line with Wood's words, the little wizards next to George turned their heads, with the same smile as Wood's on their faces. Hey, just go along honestly and don't embarrass the brothers. Otherwise, it's easy to hurt the friendship between classmates. George swallowed. Classmate, can you bear to watch me being tortured by Professor McGonagall for more than a year? Doesn't your conscience hurt? Wood and Rogers laughed, lifted George's arm under George's horrified gaze, and carried him toward the Quidditch pitch. Let me go, please, let me go, Professor McGonagall will kill me. George kept begging for mercy. Wood shook his head. Sorry George, Professor McGonagall said that if we can't bring you to the stadium, she will treat us as teaching supplies. The surrounding students all nodded and cast helpless looks at George. Teaching supplies. Let me go. Let me go quickly, I don't want to go over. George struggled wildly, trying to free himself from the restraints of Wood and Rogers. No, subdue him. Wood turned his head and motioned to the wizards in the team to subdue George. No. Don't. More than half of the wizards pulled out their wands, muttering to themselves that they didn't mean to do so while pulling out their wands. 10 petrifying rays fell on George, and his voice stopped. Wood and Rogers held their hands, and the group walked to the Quidditch pitch. Whenever the petrification spell is about to end, a wizard will be assigned to the team to replenish George's petrified state. Until they successfully arrived at the Quidditch pitch, handed George to Professor McGonagall, and received her approving look. Wood and the others were relieved that they no longer had to be used as teaching tools. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the huge Quidditch pitch was filled with little wizards. They occupied the 4 directions of the Quidditch pitch, using the college as the boundary. In the center of the court are the loveless George and Professor McGonagall. The professor's wrinkled face is filled with an innocent smile. She had thought about holding a public class on transfiguration many years ago, but due to the lack of a suitable target for casting spells, this plan had always been kept in Professor McGonagall's mind. Ahem, the professor cleared her throat, put her wand against her throat, and cast the loud voice charm to ensure that every little wizard could hear her voice. Transfiguration is a very profound subject that is widely used in life and practical combat. Good transfiguration wizards may not necessarily be good at casting spells, but they are definitely good at fighting. But it's a pity that as the future of the wizarding world, you don't pay much attention to the transfiguration class. You think it is a useless fun class. Professor McGonagall said coldly. As a professor of transfiguration for grades 1 to 7, she discovered a very serious problem, that is, no wizards paid attention to transfiguration. They spend their time on charms, potions, or playing. After completing the transfiguration homework, they will not study transfiguration in private, nor will they use the knowledge learned in transfiguration. In order to change this phenomenon and let more wizards understand the charm of the transfiguration class, Professor McGonagall took the opportunity to hold this open class on transfiguration. Today, I and Mr. George Weasley will demonstrate to everyone the usefulness of transfiguration in life and combat. George put on a forced smile and waved to greet the wizards. George? Is he the Gryffindor student you mentioned, brother, who went on the adventure with you? In the stadium stands, Chu Jong pulled the hem of Louis' clothes and asked curiously. Yes, he also has Fred, and Lee Jordan was my companion last night. It's just that he spoke ill of Professor McGonagall last night and was caught red-handed by Professor McGonagall. Chu Jong covered her mouth in surprise. Due to the distance, she didn't see the hopeless expression on George's face, and thought that George took the initiative to be Professor McGonagall's assistant. He's so awesome. He actually dares to speak ill of the professor. Chu Jong said gloatingly. Chapter 72. Yes, George is very brave. Louis said with the same gloating. She spoke ill of her in front of Professor McGonagall and said she was a menopausal old woman. It would be strange if she was not punished by Professor McGonagall. I just don't know if George can come back alive, poor George. After silently mourning for George for a tenth of a second, Louis smiled evilly and took out his SLR camera. He planned to take a picture of George's heroic figure and release it for guests to watch on George's wedding day. It must be a beautiful scene, hey hey hey. Standing in the middle of the grass, George had a bad feeling. He set his sights on Professor McGonagall, thinking that she would do something bad to him. George didn't notice that on the east side of the stand, Louis was holding a camera in his hand. After adjusting the focus, it was facing him. Brother Louis, is that a camera you're holding in your hand? Can you let me see it, please? Chu Jong said coquettishly, pulling on the corner of Louis' clothes. Of course, you can, but you have to be careful when playing and don't adjust the focus. The rest is up to you. Taking over the latest Nikon camera, Chu Jong followed Louis' example and put the camera next to her eyes. Through the lens, she could clearly see George standing on the field. How bad you are, brother Louis. Chu Jong understood Louis' intention instantly, smiled coquettishly, and patted Louis on the shoulder. The idea was very bad, but Chu Jong liked it very much. Louis had a sinister smile on his face, and just as he was about to say something, Professor McGonagall spoke. Okay, next I will use Mr. George as the target of the spell to show everyone the effect of the transformation spell. No, No, Professor McGonagall, I was wrong, Before he could finish begging for mercy, Professor McGonagall had already turned George into a piglet. Louis quickly took the camera back from Chujong and took several photos of George's position. There are 10 rolls of black and white film and 27 rolls of color film in his space bag, enough to capture all of George's changes. The pink piglet screamed and ran wildly on the lawn with its 4 short legs, trying to get rid of Professor McGonagall's control. This is the most common use of the transformation spell. It turns a wizard into a creature. It should be noted that you must remain absolutely awake when casting the spell and think about what it will look like after the change. The more detailed the better. With that said, Professor McGonagall waved gently, and Piggy returned to Professor McGonagall under the influence of magic power. Secondly, casting transformation spells on wizards and various magical creatures is the most profound and mysterious knowledge in transfiguration. Once it is not mastered well, it may cause harm to them and themselves. Finally, casting a transformation spell on a wizard requires a lot of magic power. If the magic power is not enough, it will be difficult to cast the transformation spell successfully. Out of professorial instinct, Professor McGonagall added many things to note when casting the transformation spell. Clap 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 clap. Warm applause rang out from the stands, and the applause lasted for a long time. It was not until Professor McGonagall lowered her hands slightly to signal that they could stop that they gradually stopped. Now I will change Mr. George back to his original form. Remember, every transformation spell has a corresponding counter curse. Even different variations of the same transformation spell have different counter curses. The wand drew several mysterious symbols in the air, and finally landed on George, transforming him from the piggy back to his original appearance. All transformation spells and corresponding counterspells are recorded in the library's collection of transformation spells. Young wizards who are interested can borrow them from the library to learn. Professor McGonagall recommended loudly. George fell at her feet, his body hunched into a ball, his hands and feet dancing wildly in the air, as if he was still thinking about escaping. Glancing at George, Professor McGonagall tilted her head unbearably. She didn't want to use students as teaching aids, but in order to attract more students' attention, an unlucky guy had to stand up and show the power of the transformation spell. Judging from the situation at the scene, George's efforts were necessary. Professor McGonagall heard more than once that the students were discussing learning the transfiguration spell. Unfortunately, Mr. George doesn't seem to be feeling well. Is there any wizard willing to be my assistant for the next course? Professor McGonagall looked around. After seeing George's miserable state, no wizard was willing to act as George's substitute. They lowered their heads as if they were asleep, avoiding Professor McGonagall's gaze. Okay, then we can only feel sorry for Mr. George. But in his situation, alas, we can only wait until he gets better before letting him be his assistant. Professor McGonagall clapped her hands regretfully, and several house elves came to the center of the field with 2 large iron cages. Obviously Professor McGonagall had already prepared the materials for casting spells, and George was just an unlucky guy who attracted the attention of the little wizards and pushed him out. There is an African lion in the first cage. I will cast a transformation spell on it to turn it into a lion and fight with the lion. Professor McGonagall pointed to a wooden bench and said. Wood and others flew to the edge on broomsticks, took George back to the edge of the field and settled him down, then helped Professor McGonagall open the iron cage holding the lion, and released the male lion who had been hungry for several days. The male lion is the authentic African lion king. With a body length of nearly 3 meters from head to tail and a weight of 263 kilograms on an empty stomach, the male lion rules a vast territory on the African savanna. Unfortunately, no matter how powerful it is not a threat to wizards, because the magic resistance of ordinary creatures is too low. A first-level wizard with rich combat experience is enough to kill most ordinary animals on land. Only animals like elephants and brown bears, with rough skin and thick flesh and strong vitality, require a second-level wizard to kill them. The lion's eyes were green. In order to maintain its aggressiveness, it had not had a full meal for 3 days. As soon as it came out, it pounced on Professor McGonagall, trying to tear out Professor McGonagall's throat with its teeth and have a good meal. Louis. That big lion is so scary. Chujong was frightened by the green eyes of the lion, and his body involuntarily moved closer to Louis. It's okay, we are wizards. We are the most unreasonable creatures on the entire planet. Lions and the like are no match for us. Louis comforted Chujong while stroking his hair. On the field, the lion was stuck in a deep quagmire and could not move. This is another use of the transformation spell. It changes the state of the environment to assist in combat. Professor McGonagall pointed at the quagmire and introduced. Changing the environment seems to have no effect, but at a critical moment, the environment can affect the outcome of a battle. As he spoke, Professor McGonagall used the crystal ball to play a scene of two wizards standing in the rain fighting. One of the wizards wore a hood to block the rain from affecting his vision, while the other wizard did not and allowed his body to be washed away by the rain. Chapter 73. I guess you have already guessed the outcome of the battle. Two wizards with the same strength have the advantage of the environment. That is, the wizard wearing the hood wins. His name is Carol. He is called the Rain God by the Death Eaters. He is a hero in the war against the Dark Lord and a powerful transfiguration wizard. It's a pity. Professor McGonagall's voice became smaller and smaller, and her mouth could only be seen opening and closing, but no sound could be heard. Carol was Professor McGonagall's classmate when she was a student, a very good friend of hers, and a member of the same hobby organization, the Transfiguration Club. In the summer, Carol died in a terrorist attack by Death Eaters. Sorry, I lost my temper, let's get started. Professor McGonagall's wand rose upwards, and the terrifying magic enveloped the entire Quidditch pitch, transforming it into the appearance of the African savanna. Burnt yellow, grasslands of different shades replaced the regular lawns, the 3 iron cages disappeared into the grass half a man high, and the quagmire that restrained the lion also disappeared, freeing it. However, the lion, which had been taught a lesson once, did not dare to come forward and slowly walked around Professor McGonagall. The familiar environment around it gave it the feeling of going home. McGonagall waved her wand again, and 2 straight poplar trees rose from under her feet. The branches intertwined to form a wooden platform, carrying Professor McGonagall to a height of 10 meters in the air. After being ready for everything, Professor McGonagall snapped her fingers, and the 2 house elves teleported to the lion and threw a piece of fresh venison at it. After the lion finished eating the venison and his physical strength returned to normal, Professor McGonagall said, "Watch out, I will demonstrate a style of transformation in combat, which we call the Great Summoner style." After saying that, Professor McGonagall recited the lion transformation spell, turning the only wooden stool on the grass into a lion about the same size as a lion. Ow! The lion transformed by Professor McGonagall roared angrily, stepped out with 4 strong thighs, and pounced on the male lion who kept shrinking and was frightened by the sudden appearance of the lion. The 2 lions fought together, with flesh and hair flying everywhere. The transformed lion's fighting power was no less than that of the real lion. Not afraid of death, it quickly took advantage and locked the lion's neck tightly. Before they could decide the winner, Professor McGonagall used a restoration spell to change the wooden stool back to its original appearance. She is not a dark wizard who loves killing, and there is no need to use the life of a lion to prove the power of transfiguration. You may think that defeating an ordinary creature is not difficult. I believe that most of the wizards present have the strength to defeat the lion. In order to prove the power of the Grand Summoner style, I prepared the second type of teaching supplies. The iron cage covered with black cloth reappeared, and wood and others flew over on magic broomsticks, drove the lion back to its iron cage, and then uncovered the black cloth on the next iron cage. There were 20 huge acromantulas in the iron cage. They were brought out by Professor McGonagall from the Forbidden Forest. Placing them in the Forbidden Forest would be a disaster, so it was better to get them out and use them as teaching supplies. Everyone should have learned about the acromantula from monsters and their origins, right? A 5-star magical animal with good magic resistance and strong fertility. Nowadays, these things are basically found in the depths of the Forbidden Forest. According to the textbook compiled by Newt, the acromantula is powerful and comparable to the sharpest sword in the world. Its magical defense is in the middle of 5-star magical animals and can withstand a lot of damage from magic spells. Suddenly seeing the light, the acromantulas hit the iron cage crazily, their bloodthirsty gazes swept over the little wizards, frightening many of the little wizards to tremble, and a warmth rushed straight into their lower abdomens. Are you ready? I'll count to 3, pull up the iron cage door and fly into the sky. Don't be caught by the acromantula. 2 long iron chains were connected to the iron gate. 8 Quidditch players lined up on both sides of the iron chain. Under Wood's command, they drove the broomsticks and flew into the blue sky with the iron gate. As soon as the iron gate was pulled away, the acromantulas rushed out. Several acromantulas jumped up from the ground and grabbed Wood and others. There were also a few that took a fancy to Professor McGonagall and wanted to climb up the trunk to attack her. Please be careful, what happens next will subvert your understanding of transfiguration. Professor McGonagall shouted. Spirit of nature, obey my command and return from your slumber. Professor McGonagall's voice echoed on the court. Even without the sound amplification spell, Lewis and the others sitting at the edge of the court could clearly hear Professor McGonagall's spell. Name, McGonagall Minerva. Occupation, Epic Level, Wizard. Talent? Skill? Group Transformation Spell, Tree Form, currently being cast? After the wizard's level increased, the detection range also increased significantly. The first time he used it, he could distinguish the spell currently being cast by Professor McGonagall. Dots of fluorescent green light fell from the sky, and the acromantulas gathered together as if facing a formidable enemy. They felt the danger from the curse. The light spots fell on the ground, and one big tree after another rose up from the grass. The big tree was about 7 or 8 meters high. A human face with closed eyes appeared on the trunk, and under the face were 2 thick branches. Wake up! Spirit of nature! Professor McGonagall gave an order, and all the tree people opened their eyes. They held their big brown hands on the ground and pulled out the parts hidden in the earth. I go, is transformation so powerful? In other words, what we are playing is not actually a profession. You are the druid hidden in the wizard. Lewis is frightened by the army of tree people summoned by Professor McGonagall. Not only Lewis, but most of the wizards on the scene were also frightened by Professor McGonagall's spells. Just as Professor McGonagall said, what they saw today would subvert their understanding of transfiguration. Some tree men have no weapons in their hands, while others hold a wooden sledgehammer or a wooden shield. The tree man holding a shield is at the front, followed by the tall tree man holding a sledgehammer, and the tree man with empty hands is in the last row. Sharp javelins condensed in their hands, and with a sound, they threw them at the acromantulas who were surrounded by an army of tree men in the center. Have you ever seen a javelin more than 10 centimeters thick? This was the first time Lewis saw such a thick thing flying in the sky. The acromantulas huddled in a circle, pressing their backs with the thickest shells against the outside. The moment the javelin hit the shell, the body sank sharply, and green blood flowed from the wound. However, compared to the huge body of the acromantula, the wound did not even account for 1%. After resisting the javelin attack, the acromantula opened its bloodthirsty fangs and rushed towards the shield wall composed of the first row of tree men at extremely fast speeds. The dark venom corroded large holes in the wooden shield. Chapter 74. The first row of tree men knelt on one knee, supporting the broken wooden shield with all their strength. The second row of tree men stepped forward and slammed the sledgehammer in their hands towards the acromantula's head. The wooden hammer made contact with the hard head and was quickly bounced away. Apart from feeling dizzy, the acromantula suffered no damage at all. Professor McGonagall was on the wooden platform with her eyebrows furrowed. She was controlling the tree people to fight with her eyes closed. The tree people could be arranged into 3 rows according to their functions entirely under her command. The first hammer did not cause much damage, and the second hammer came down quickly. As long as Professor McGonagall's magic power was not exhausted, a steady stream of tree people would obey her command and fight for her. A powerful epic wizard has at least 4 magic points. A veteran epic wizard like Professor McGonagall has more than 10 magic points, which is enough for her to maintain her status quo for minutes. Lewis was stunned by the tragic and dangerous scene on the field. The acromantula's organized attack was blocked by the tree people, and they supported each other and returned to the center position. After a short rest, he pounced again, using the 2 strongest acromantulas as spearheads, and struck hard at the weak defensive position of the tree people army. Professor McGonagall mobilized her troops in a leisurely manner, and the tree men moved slowly under her command, squeezing the space for the acromantulas to move step by step. The tree man blocking the acromantula gradually fell down and turned into a pile of fine sand and disappeared on the ground. When the acromantulas broke through the last line of defense, the reinforcements mobilized by Professor McGonagall had arrived long ago and formed a smaller encirclement around the acromantulas, trapping them tightly. Boom! Boom! The tree people stepped forward in a regular manner, and finally surrounded the 20 slightly injured acromantulas. They waved their wooden arms, and the sledgehammers turned into sharp swords, and they attacked randomly around the acromantulas. A good man should wield a 3-foot sword and achieve unparalleled achievements. Lewis felt an inexplicable passion to crusade against the god of death. I think this is how Deng and Emperor Ge made their promise to crusade. But soon, the passion was replaced by calmness. He has a warm family, although there is something fishy about the death of his parents. which requires Lewis to investigate when he becomes an adult. But fundamentally speaking, he has no need to fight against the god of death. All he can do is write a few books to improve the overall level of the magic world, so that future generations of wizards can hopefully conquer the god of death. Just as he was thinking about a better life in the future, Chu Zhang's voice rang in his ears. Brother Lewis! Brother Lewis! Aren't you scared? Chu Zhang gently shook Lewis' wrist, trying to wake him up from his meditation. What? Does Xiao Kai Hu Zhang feel scared? Lewis asked curiously. Chu Zhang nodded. She was indeed frightened by the bloody scene. A large pool of dark green liquid appeared in the center of the tree man, and the remains of the body continued to flow out along with the blood. This terrifying and disgusting scene made many little wizards hold their stomachs and retching. This was the first time they had seen such a bloody scene since birth. Seeing this, Professor McGonagall secretly thought something was wrong. She didn't expect that modern wizards' ability to accept it was so poor. Watching a murder scene made them feel uncomfortable. If they continue to watch, Professor McGonagall suspects that they will become afraid of transfiguration, which Professor McGonagall does not want to see. Alas, judging from their appearance, the third prop was probably out of use. Professor McGonagall felt a little regretful because she had not yet killed a fire dragon with the transformation spell. Yes, she wanted to use the transformation spell to kill the fire dragon. In order to show the power of the transformation spell, Professor McGonagall used connections to get an old Welsh green dragon from a former student. She originally wanted to use several other schools of transformation in the third round of battle, but it seemed that most of the students would not be able to accept it. Due to time constraints, I will not show the other schools of transfiguration. Interested students can go to the library to study by themselves, or ask Professor Dumbledore and me. Cutting off the supply of magic power, the tree man who killed 20 acromantulas like a god of war suddenly stopped, and his body turned into fine sand and disappeared between heaven and earth. Then Professor McGonagall changed the place back to its original appearance, called a house elf, and after giving it a few instructions, the house elf teleported back to the underground cafeteria and brought a group of companions to clean up the bloodstains on the grass. Clap 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 clap. Continuous applause broke out. This was the highest respect that wizards showed to Professor McGonagall, thanking her for allowing them to watch a wonderful battle. After everything was cleaned up and the venue was restored to its original Quidditch venue, Professor McGonagall put her wand to her throat. The next is interactive time. You can challenge me. I will use only transfiguration to counter your magic. Since the fire dragon could not be used, Professor McGonagall simply used the students as props to demonstrate transfiguration. If no one came to challenge her, she would let George act as her opponent. Who would let him call her a menopausal old woman behind her back? Professor McGonagall thought angrily. Don't worry, I won't hurt you with magic. I just want you to experience the charm of transfiguration up close. Professor McGonagall's face turned slightly red as she spoke. Other professors were kind enough to lend her their classes, but she promoted the transfiguration spell in class. She felt that she was unworthy of the trust of the other professors. The wizards in the stands hesitated for a long time. They had seen what happened to George, and they did not want to be turned into a piggy by Professor McGonagall. George, then Professor McGonagall was about to ask George to come over. Suddenly, a voice came from the east stand, I'm coming. Opportunities to fight against epic wizards are rare. As long as he can gain enough combat experience, Lewis will feel that he has made a profit by being turned into a piglet or even a piece of shit. Anyway, he filmed a lot of George's dark history, and even if he died in society, he could drag George to die in society together. Okay. Professor McGonagall couldn't help but praise Lewis when he saw Lewis standing up and walking towards the Quidditch pitch. He is worthy of being a wizard who dares to stay as a queen. His courage is much stronger than that of the lions in his own academy. If only he could have been brought to Gryffindor. Professor Sprout said that he was an expert. After her, another dean regretted not taking the initiative to ask Lewis when he was branching out. Warrior, how dare you fight Professor McGonagall? Wood looked at Lewis with admiration in his eyes. Lewis had done everything the little lion wanted to do but didn't dare to do. As the dean, Professor McGonagall has extremely high prestige within Gryffindor. Even 6th and 7th year wizards do not dare to mess with her, let alone challenge her. This is also the reason why no one in Gryffindor, which has always been known for its recklessness and boldness, dares to stand up and adjust Professor McGonagall. They are afraid of being targeted by Professor McGonagall afterwards. Chapter 75. Especially with George Pearl in front of them, after seeing his miserable state, the little lions became even more afraid to provoke Professor McGonagall. Wood took Lewis with a magic broom, placed him on the lawn 30 meters away from Professor McGonagall, and then ran away on the broom as if he was escaping. "You prepare first, and we will start when you are ready. Don't worry, there is still a lot of time," Professor McGonagall said in a comforting voice to avoid Lewis being nervous. If she scared away Lewis, the only one who dared to come forward and fight her, Professor McGonagall doubted that she would be able to meet the next challenger. Lewis nodded, took out the dragon wand, adjusted his breathing and lowered his center of gravity, prepared for battle, and said, "I'm ready, Professor McGonagall." "Okay, don't worry, I'll attack you later. I'll only use magic to defend, so I won't hurt you." Lewis raised his wand in front of him and bowed to Professor McGonagall. After completing the wizard duel etiquette, he whispered the sleeping spell. Passed out. The top of the wand emits a strong red light, and the sleeping spell beam flies towards Professor McGonagall, who is 30 meters away. The sleeping spell is a relatively difficult spell. It needs to be aimed directly at the person being cast. If there is a slight deviation in the right hand, the spell beam may miss. Weeds change. The weed transformation belongs to the plant transformation spell branch and is a member of the herb transformation spell. Also belonging to the herb transformation spell are rose transformation, and other transformation types. A green grass quickly grew into a giant weed more than 2 meters tall with no gaps between the leaves. At the narrowest point, there are centimeter-wide weeds that just block Professor McGonagall's body. No matter what kind of light spell comes directly in front of her, it will be blocked by the weeds. In the discipline of transformation, the second most important school is called defensive counterattack flow, which transforms various creatures to bear the spell on behalf of the wizard, and then uses transformed creatures or magic to win. Lewis stopped casting spells in time to allow Professor McGonagall to introduce the defensive counterattack style. Professor McGonagall, who had been paying attention to Lewis' situation, saw this, and his love for Lewis increased to a new level. Brave and aware of the importance, he did not interrupt his introduction to the genre rashly. How great it would be if he were a Gryffindor student. After feeling regretful for a while, Professor McGonagall continued. For example, now, I use the plant and tree transformation spell to block the sleeping spell. Next, I can prepare the magic leisurely. Come on, kids, let's demonstrate it to them. After saying that, Professor McGonagall lifted the transformation spell she had just cast, and the grass between her and Lewis instantly shrank to its original appearance, a young grass that had just sprouted. Fell to the ground. The sleeping curse beam flew out again. Weeds change. After using the transmutation spell, Professor McGonagall silently recited the petrification spell and moved her body. At the moment when the petrification spell was ready to be completed, the wand just happened to circle the weeds and point at Lewis. A sense of danger arose spontaneously, and before Lewis could react, the petrifying curse light pillar had already arrived at his feet. The higher the level of the wizard, the stronger the understanding and mastery of magic spells, and the stronger the magic spells in the same state. This is the petrification spell that Professor McGonagall cast casually. She only used the lowest 10 points of magic power, but the power and speed of the spell were much stronger than Lewis. He was just a wizard apprentice when he participated in the Wild Hunt, and he was able to avoid Sophie's petrification spell by relying on his physical fitness. Now he is a second-level wizard, and his physique is 7 or 8 times stronger than his original self, but he cannot avoid Professor McGonagall's petrification spell. The petrified light pillar fell at Lewis' feet. Centered on the landing point, the lawn with a radius of half a meter turned into stone, and even Lewis' legs felt numb. In addition to using magic spells to counterattack, I can also transform a bunch of creatures that obey my command and let them attack Lewis. This is the essence of the defensive counterattack flow, to counterattack the enemy while ensuring that I am not harmed. Oh! Professor, you are so great! Professor McGonagall's explanation received a round of applause. It was the first time for the little wizards to know that there are so many schools of transfiguration credits. Especially 7th-year Muggle wizards, who are about to enter society, have never heard of genres in the past 17 years. In their impression, wizards fight with wands. Whoever's spells are more powerful and whoever has stronger magic reserves will win the battle. Wizards from noble families were a little calmer. As early as when they were learning common sense in the magic world, their elders had explained the various mainstream fighting factions in the magic world. Pure magic spell faction, transmutation spell faction, Transmutation spell and magic mixed faction, alchemy and magic mixed faction. Various factions fill the wizarding world. If you don't understand these factions in advance, you may be killed in the battle. Never start a war with an unknown wizard unless you have a powerful family behind you. This sentence is common knowledge in the wizarding world, but for many Muggle wizards, they have never heard of it. Why is Professor McGonagall so crazy? She actually popularized the secrets of wizards to the mud-legged people. Damn it, doesn't she know that this is an established habit in the wizarding world? Deep in Slytherin Academy, several noble wizards looked at Professor McGonagall with gloomy faces. Let Muggle wizards know all kinds of wizarding secrets. What qualifications do they have to maintain a sense of superiority in front of Muggle wizards? Damn Professor McGonagall. Those who have the above idea are a group of small family wizards, similar to the 28 pure-blood wizards who dismiss it. It's just a little secret, and it doesn't pose a threat at all to them who control the lifeblood of the British wizarding world. Go on, kid. You're welcome, feel free to use the magic spell to attack me. Okay, Professor McGonagall, please be careful. Cliff sword. Professor McGonagall herself said you're welcome, and Lewis simply used the earth stab technique. Spells on the ground can be blocked with plants, but can you also use transformation to block the spells coming from below the ground? Lewis thought with a smile. Professor McGonagall was stunned. When she was young, some old wizards from the early 20th century liked to use the earth stab technique. Not since her first year at Hogwarts as Professor of Transfiguration had she heard the terrestrial spell. Modern wizards, even Professor Flitwick, the master of spells, prefer to use instant spells such as light beams, rather than material change spells closely related to transfiguration. She quickly reacted, pointed her wand at the ground beneath her feet, and cast a material-changing spell, the clay iron exchange spell, to transform the ground beneath her feet into hard iron. The sharp ground thorns pressed against the iron block, raising it along with Professor McGonagall by more than 10 centimeters. The ground thorn technique failed. The ground stab technique used by Mr. Lewis, and the magic spell I just used, are the last major school of transfiguration, a school of material transformation that was very popular in the past. Chapter 76. The material change flow is good at changing the properties of objects. The most commonly used ones are air and the magic in the air. Use magic spells to transform them into flames or ice. Professor McGonagall introduced. The Fire Curse and the Obstacle Curse are all material change spells. In some wizard planes, this type of wand also has a well-known name, that is, shaping spells. Do you know any other material changing spells? Use them and let me see. Professor McGonagall asked in a low voice. Since Lewis can use the ground stabbing technique, Professor McGonagall believes that Lewis can also use other transformation spells. Recite the ice cone spell, and use the right hand holding the dragon charm to perform the ice cone spell casting movements according to fixed gestures. 3 ice picks nearly 1 meter long and 10 centimeters thick at their thickest part appeared beside Lewis. Under the control of his mental power, the 3 ice picks flew side by side towards Professor McGonagall. Very beautiful ice pick technique. Professor McGonagall praised. She turned the air in front of her into an earthen wall. After blocking 3 ice picks, Professor McGonagall dispelled the wall, put her wand against her throat and said, Ice Cone, a transmutation spell that changes the magic in the air into an ice cone. Around the 16th century, it was one of the most commonly used spells in the entire wizarding world. It is ranked as the 3 must-have spells along with the fire spell and the petrification spell. It's a pity. Professor McGonagall's tone suddenly changed. The process of using the ice cone technique and the ground sting technique is too cumbersome, and has gradually been replaced by the popular magic spells. Her face was full of disappointment. As a wizard whose main research direction was transfiguration, or the deeper science of shaping, Professor McGonagall was extremely yearning for the 16th century. The magic power consumption is huge. Just condensing 3 ice picks requires Lewis 27 magic points. It also needs to be guided by the spirit. Without guidance, the ice picks cannot even move autonomously. No wonder the ice cone spell was eliminated by wizards in favor of light spells that cost less and are easier to learn and use. Go on, I'll give you a little suggestion. Don't give up on these magic spells. When you study deeper, you will find that the transformation flow charm can do many things that existing magic spells cannot do. The deeper the research goes, the deeper the understanding of the laws, and the greater the power of the transformation curse. Okay, Professor, thank you for your suggestion, I will continue to study. After speaking, Louis took a few steps forward. The casting range of the trap spell was much smaller than the other two spells. Louis needed to go 20 meters away from Professor McGonagall to cast it. Take the initiative to come closer. Are you not familiar with magic spells, or is it that the magic spell he wants to use has a distance limit? Questions flashed through Professor McGonagall's mind. But when she heard the spell from Louis' mouth, Professor McGonagall instantly understood. Louis wants to use the earth trap technique, a magic spell that few people would learn when the material transformation school was at its peak. After closing his eyes and using his mental power to determine Professor McGonagall's position, Louis used the ground trap technique on the ground beneath her feet. What's going on? Is it an earthquake? The wizards in the stands felt the ground shaking. When they came to their senses and looked towards the center of the field, they found that the place where Professor McGonagall had been was shrouded in a cloud of smoke, making it impossible to see what was going on inside. Then a wind blade visible to the naked eye flew into the sky, splitting away the smoke surrounding Professor McGonagall, revealing Professor McGonagall standing above the large hole. There was an ice peony under her feet, and the branches made of ice spread downwards and disappeared into the 6-meter-deep cave. The wizard robe on her body was as clean as before, and there was a smile on her serious face. Are there any other spells? Use them all and let me see. Professor McGonagall said expectantly. After experiencing the power of Louis's full-scale subsidence spell, Professor McGonagall suddenly had the idea of accepting Louis as his apprentice. Although this idea passed away briefly, it made Professor McGonagall more interested in Louis and wanted to know more about Louis' research on transfiguration. I'm sorry, Professor, I don't have any magic power anymore. Louis put the dragon back into his wand bag, and a bit of regret flashed across Louis' face. It would be great if he could use unlimited magic power like he did during the breakthrough. More than 100 points of magic power couldn't help but be spent. He only used 5 magic spells and fell into a state of no mana. Professor McGonagall blushed slightly. She had forgotten that Louis was still a second-year wizard. He had limited magic power in his body and could not cast many spells. I understand, you should go back first and come to me when you are free. After giving instructions to Louis, Professor McGonagall used a loud spell, Wood, come and take Louis back. Wood grabbed the broom and flew to Louis, come with me, hero. My name is Wood, a third-year Gryffindor student. My goal is to become an official Quidditch player. Wood showed great respect for Louis. Not only did Louis dare to fight Professor McGonagall, but his strength in the battle shocked Wood, making him subconsciously put himself in a weak position. The magic spell you used just now is so cool. Can you tell me what its name is? Wood asked curiously as he flew to the stands. Ground Trap, a large-scale attack spell, you should be able to find it in the Hogwarts library. Yeah, thank you. You can come to the Gryffindor Lounge when you have time. You will be welcomed by everyone. After sending Louis back to Kaizang and leaving a thank you and invitation, Wood hurried away on his broom. He was going to show off to his good friends the name of the curse he had asked from Louis. Does anyone else want to challenge me? The time is limited. The challenge will be over after noon today. After restoring the big hole to its original state, Professor McGonagall shouted confidently. I come. Professor McGonagall, I am your loyal fan, please choose me. After watching the entire challenge process, the wizards had a deep understanding of the extent of Professor McGonagall's actions. He won't hurt himself or embarrass himself, and he is still a professor-level figure. In the entire wizarding world, I'm afraid not many people have the treatment of a professor. Chu-Jong raised her hand equally excitedly. She wanted to fight Professor McGonagall, who was called the strongest witch in Britain. Unfortunately, Professor McGonagall did not choose her, but chose a Gryffindor student. After all, this is his own college. As the dean, Professor McGonagall is naturally more partial. Why not me? Chu-Jong lowered his head depressedly. It's okay. Didn't Professor McGonagall say that the challenge lasts until noon? It's only 10:30 in the morning. There's still more than an hour left. He sighed helplessly. As a boy and Chu-Jang's god brother, he couldn't see Chu-Jong sad. Louis could only step forward to comfort him. If it were an ordinary girl, he would have told her to get away as far as she wanted, and not to let her being around him affect her mood. Chapter 77. But what if it's not my turn? There are more than 600 people present, how can they come here in more than an hour? Chu-Jong couldn't help but look at Louis worriedly. Then I'll go find Professor McGonagall to intercede and let her test you. How about that? Louis said with a headache. Little Lily is good, but all kinds of questions and worries are really annoying. Chu Jong looked at Louis hesitantly, and after making sure that he was not perfunctory with her, but that he really felt that he could find a way to intercede with the professor, he finally let go of his worries. The Gryffindor student on the field only lasted 3 minutes, and after consuming all his magic power, he voluntarily exited the field. After he left, Professor McGonagall looked to the east of the field, where she was preparing to select the next challenger from Ravenclaw House. His eyes swept over the little wizard. When he saw Louis, Professor McGonagall paused and turned to look at Chu Jong, who was sitting next to Louis, and raised her hand to let him choose her. The little lady next to Mr. Louis, do you want to spar with me? Me? Chu Jong pointed at himself in surprise, and jumped out of his seat after reacting. Seeing that the lucky one was a woman, Angelina Johnson flew over on a broomstick. Like wood, she was a member of the Gryffindor Quidditch team. At 7:30 in the morning, Professor McGonagall called them into the office. The first order given to them was to ask them to send George to the stadium, and the second order was to ask them to act as volunteers and help her take care of things. I'll go over first, thank you, Louis. Before leaving, Chu Jong seemed to have thought of something, turned around and hugged Louis excitedly. Because she knew that if she had not sat next to Louis, but sat somewhere else, the opportunity to challenge Professor McGonagall would not have fallen to Chu Jong. Then, Cho Chang sat behind Angelina's broom under her gossiping gaze. You and him don't have that kind of relationship, do you? Angelina asked, gossiping while flying. How is that possible? Louis is my brother, that's all. Chu Jong responded with a blushing face. At that time in the trap, she may have thought that she fell in love with Louis under the influence of dependent emotions, but now, Chu Jong and Louis are still at the stage of being more than friends and not yet lovers. Besides, she and Louis were only 11 and 12 years old respectively, and they had not yet reached the stage where their hormones were surging and they wanted to find partners of the opposite sex. Okay, I thought you were a couple. Angelina didn't get what she wanted. Angelina sped up her broom and sent Cho Chang to the Quidditch field. She whispered encouragement. Come on. Behave better in front of Professor McGonagall. After a few cursory glances at the battle on the field, Louis suddenly lost interest in continuing to watch. Chu Jong only knew a petrification spell that sometimes worked but didn't work. She was lucky enough to cast it successfully once, but due to poor accuracy, it fell between her and Professor McGonagall. She didn't know where she got the courage to challenge Professor McGonagall. She shook her head helplessly, and Louis put his consciousness back on his newly acquired abilities. Summoning a raven and becoming a raven. What are the uses of these two bloodline talents? He was too tired when he returned to the lounge last night. After obtaining the third bonus ability, Louis fell into a deep sleep without even experimenting with the new abilities and bloodline abilities. Only now did he have time to review and organize the 3 newly acquired abilities. The first is to summon a raven. As a bloodline inheritance skill, an introduction to this ability automatically appeared in Louis' head after he awakened. It's just that at that time, Louis was busy practicing attack spells and had no time to check the new knowledge in his head. Close your eyes and recall the description of knowledge that came with your awakening in your mind. Summoning a raven is the most common bloodline skill in the inherited bloodline. 8 out of 10 Lestrange wizards who have awakened the bloodline talent have awakened this talent. Depending on the thickness of the bloodline, the wizard's awakened bloodline skills are very different. If the bloodline is thin, the ability will be weak, and if the bloodline is thick, the innate ability will be strong. Of course there are different examples, such as Louis' grandfather, Cobos Lestrange v. now Abernathy. The bloodline talent he awakened is the waterproof talent, a talent that is not part of the Lestrange family's inherited ability. A wizard who has awakened the raven summoning technique can summon a family of ravens who have made a contract with their ancestors through their bloodline. According to the knowledge in his head, the ravens summoned are all magical animal-level ravens with intelligence and combat power far exceeding those of their ordinary counterparts in the human world. Unfortunately, every wizard who awakens this talent can only summon a raven as a contract partner at first. Only by passing the test of the raven and making it think that you can be the attachment object of the group can the wizard contract more ravens. The second bloodline ability is Raven Incarnation, which is the top ability in the inheritance. Except for the first generation Lestrange ancestors, only the purest bloodline wizards among the direct descendants of the ancestors can obtain this ability. In the family's more than 2,000-year history, only 4 wizards have the talent of raven incarnation. Among them, the first 3 are the direct children of the first-generation ancestors, and no. 4 is Louis' 10th-generation ancestor, a powerful epic wizard. Wizards with this talent can consume magic power to freely switch between raven and human states. When encountering a fatal attack, they can also turn into a bunch of small ravens and escape. As long as a little raven is alive, it will not die. Instead, it will fall into a state of essence and blood deficiency and need to absorb a large amount of energy to make up for the body's deficiency. The most important thing is that the raven incarnation, which can be called a life-saving magic skill, can be used at any time. As long as the blood essence and blood are enough, Louis can split into countless little ravens with his own personal consciousness. Energy, life force should be considered energy, right? The fountain of life that seemed useless last night has become useful now. If the vitality can be used to restore the essence and blood, a perfect transformation path will be formed. Magic power is converted into vitality through the fountain of life. Louis, who is depleted of essence and blood, absorbs vitality to replenish essence and blood, and then in turn absorbs free magic power from the air to replenish the loss, just perfect. Well, it's so embarrassing. My performance must be very poor, Louis. Qiu Zhang's voice came to his ears. Well, he didn't watch it for too long at all, how could he evaluate Qiu Zhang's performance? Louis suddenly became numb. You're doing very well. You're only in the 1st grade and have only been exposed to magic for a few months. It's okay to behave badly. After thinking about it in his head for a while, Louis said with relief. In his past life and this life, he was over 30 years old and had no love experience at all. In his previous life, no girl liked him. In this life, he has not reached the age of dating yet and does not know how to comfort girls. Chapter 78. It's so perfunctory. Qiu Zhang pouted, obviously not very satisfied with Louis' answer, but she didn't say anything and sat down next to Louis in relief. Professor McGonagall is doing well. Let me tell you, if the professor hadn't been comforting me, telling me not to be nervous, and teaching me how to cast the petrification spell, I might not have been able to say a single spell. As she sat down, Qiu Zhang said with a happy face that if it weren't for Professor McGonagall's guidance when she was on the court, she would probably have made a big joke. There are rumors that first-year students at Hogwarts don't know enough about their abilities to challenge their professors even if they don't know how to cast spells. Yes, Professor McGonagall is very nice. Louis replied with a smile. Speaking of Professor McGonagall, Louis suddenly remembered that she asked him to take time to find her before he was dismissed. The challenge lasted until 12:30 noon. After testing the last Gryffindor Quidditch player, Professor McGonagall announced that the open class on Transfiguration was over. Then I'm going to eat first. Qiu Zhang said reluctantly on the edge of the Quidditch pitch, while her friends were waiting for her. Well, you go first. I want to accompany him to the school doctor's office. Fred and Lee are still lying in the school doctor's office. Louis pointed at George and said. Before get out of class ended, this kid hurried to the Ravenclaw Academy camp and pulled Louis to let him accompany him to visit Fred and the others. Hey, what's going on with you kid? Didn't you agree to stay single with us? George said jokingly on the way to the school doctor's office. Who said that? Besides, if I don't find a beautiful girl, is it difficult to find you as my friend? He, if you are willing, I believe the family will not have any objection. Looking at the shy expression on George's face, a chill came to Louis' heart. This kid couldn't be gay. It shouldn't be. In the original book, George finally married a girl and had several children with her. In order to commemorate his dead brother, George also changed the name of one of his sons to Fred. Regardless of whether George was gay or not, Louis quickly walked aside and put a long distance away from him. Well, ha 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 ha. You won't believe it, you are too easy to deceive. Seeing Louis' behavior of distancing himself, George was stunned for a moment, and an uncontrollable smile came to his heart, holding his stomach and laughing so hard that he couldn't straighten up. After all, you stay with Fred every day, who knows whether you like boys or girls. As he said this, Louis kept a distance from George for more than half the distance, and did not let him put his hand on his shoulder. Oh my God, you are finally here. Fred sat up from the bed, and then lay back down on the bed under Madame Pomfrey's cold gaze. You two will have to lie here for 2 days until the poison in your body is completely dissipated before you can be discharged from the hospital. Do you understand? Madame Pomfrey snorted, Originally they only had to lie down for 2 days before they could get out, but the two little guys couldn't stop for a moment, either tickling or licking their butts. Many times she really wanted to prepare 2 pairs of sleeping pills and feed them to drink, so that they could sleep for 2 days without moving around and scattering the plaster on their bodies. Ah, there are still 2 days left. Fred looked bitter. If he hadn't been afraid of Madame Pomfrey, he might not have been able to stay for even half a second. I'm going to prepare the potion. Let's chat first. Perhaps because she understood that Louis and the others couldn't chat with him here, Mrs. Fred took the initiative to find an excuse and left. After she left, Fred quickly asked, "What were you doing this morning?" The sound reached the school doctor's office. 3 neat applauses and some cheers from the crowd made him curious about what was going on outside. It's an open class on Transfiguration. Professor McGonagall will tell you some news related to Transfiguration. By the way, have you had lunch? George answered before Louis. He didn't want Fred to know that he had been turned into a pig and beaten up by Professor McGonagall. At the end of the open class, after the 4 houses had rotated 10 times, Professor McGonagall gave the challenge opportunities to the Gryffindor Quidditch players. Among them was George, who was the second to play as a special guest, only behind Wood. As soon as he appeared on the stage, he was fully entertained by Professor McGonagall. He first sealed George's mouth with magic, and then transformed into various animals and asked them to play with George. Playing in the literal sense, Louis's camera still has many photos of George's expression with a bruised nose and face after playing. I've eaten it a long time ago. The nutritious meal given by Madame Pomfrey was super unpalatable and only a little bit. How about you? Not yet, we'll be here right after class, right Louis? George raised his eyes at Louis, begging him with pitiful eyes not to tell anyone about what happened that morning. Facing George's expectant gaze, Louis nodded. There was no need for him to expose George. When Fred and the others were discharged from the hospital, they would naturally know what happened to George this morning. After chatting with Fred for a while, Louis and Georgica arrived at the auditorium before 1 o'clock. By this time, the house elves were already preparing to pack their things. Boom boom boom. Please come in. In Professor McGonagall's personal office, Professor McGonagall was sitting on a chair handling the things in her hands and said without raising her head. She is reviewing the membership applications submitted by the Little Wizards. Since the end of the open class, she has received many application letters written to her by the Little Wizards. Based on the Little Wizards' final grades and their talent for transfiguration in class, Professor McGonagall processed more than 90 applications as appropriate. Among them, only 7 young wizards were approved for admission, and the remaining 80 or so application forms were all returned by Professor McGonagall. In order to take care of the Little Wizards' emotions, Professor McGonagall also wrote a letter of comfort to each little wizard. Or give them some pointers on what they need to pay attention to in their studies, or write them encouragement. Are you here to submit the application form? If so, please put it in front of the table. After the visitor entered the room, Professor McGonagall said. This afternoon alone, more than 50 people came to submit membership applications, and she thought they were one of them. No, Professor McGonagall, it's me, Louis Leiden. Yesterday you asked me to take time to come find you. Hearing Louis' voice, Professor McGonagall raised her head from the table with a smile on her face. If it's not convenient for you, I'll go back first. I'll come back when it's convenient for you. Louis said again, looking at the tall pile of letters in Professor McGonagall's hand. Chapter 79. No, 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 kids, come and sit down. You can do these things later. Professor McGonagall invited Louis to sit down. What do you want to drink? Coffee or black tea? Professor McGonagall asked as she took out her usual drink from the drawer on the side. Black tea, thank you Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall nodded, made 2 cups of black tea, and brought them to Louis. I asked you to come here mainly because I want to ask you about your views on transfiguration. If possible, I also want to ask about your plans for the next period of time. Professor McGonagall smiled and said that if Louis is not busy recently, she would like him to join the Transfiguration Club, which is the organization that young wizards apply to join. She was very optimistic about Louis and his future in Transfiguration, and wanted to attract him to the advanced subject of Transfiguration. My opinion, Louis thought for a while and said in a deep voice, I think Transfiguration, especially the last sect of Transfiguration you mentioned, and the flow of material changes are very suitable for my taste. Material change flow magic is no worse than the other two types of transformation magic. The magic itself has strong potential, and when studied to an advanced stage, it is no worse than other magics. The flow of material change, it seems that you are also a little guy who likes power. Professor McGonagall said clearly. She was also attracted by the flow of material change, and thus became associated with transfiguration. Then would you like to join the Transfiguration Fellowship and let me take you to learn the magic of transmutation? Ask Lewis if he is willing, and he is naturally willing. By learning magic from a powerful wizard like Professor McGonagall, Lewis believes that his strength will grow much faster than it is now. But just recently, he may not have the time to study. I would like to learn magic with you, but can I ask when the club will start? Professor McGonagall frowned slightly. The time hasn't been decided yet. It will probably be on Saturday or Sunday. What? Do you have anything to do these 2 days? Professor Sprout asked me to help in her herb greenhouse on Saturday, so I may not have time to attend the fan meeting on Saturday. It would be great if Professor McGonagall could set the time for Sunday. Lewis would have time to attend the club. If not, then he might have to say sorry to Professor McGonagall. The compilation of herbal medicine classics has just begun, and he has only studied and recorded less than 1/6 of the plants in the greenhouse. Each plant took several hours to study, and some complex ones took 10 hours or more to study. So, Sprout got there first. It seems that she also thinks that the little guy is worth cultivating. Recognized by 2 professors at the same time, and still the professor in charge of the college, Lewis is considered one of the few outstanding students in the history of Hogwarts. The last student who was approved by 2 professors at the same time and had to make up classes personally was named Tom Riddle. The next one was Dumbledore, who was approved by 3 deans at the same time. Only when the professors believe that the wizard has excellent qualities and is very talented in the subjects he teaches, the professors will give them recognition and give the wizard private lessons. I understand. In that case, let's set the time on Sunday from noon to afternoon. Professor McGonagall said with a smile. Whether it was Sunday noon or Saturday noon, there was no loss to her. Since her husband's death, Professor McGonagall has lived in Hogwarts all year round and studied every day. Thank you. Professor McGonagall, I want to join the Transfiguration Fellowship. Lewis responded quickly. Since Professor McGonagall has set the start time on Sunday, I would be feeling sorry for myself if I didn't participate. Okay. We still have more time. Let me first talk about the art of material change and rheology. After looking at Lewis' class schedule and making sure that he had no class this afternoon, Professor McGonagall explained. The material change flow originated in BC and has a history of more than 2,000 years. It appeared more than 1,000 years before the newly classified light spells. Light spells originated in the 10th century, and they truly differentiated as a separate branch in the 18th century, more than 200 years ago, when the flow of change spells truly declined. In our world of transfiguration, transfiguration is divided into 2 types, internal and external. The internal refers to the body, which is used to transform oneself, and the external refers to the outside world, which is used to transform the natural world. The transformation technique used on nature gradually gave rise to the later school of material transformation, while the internal transformation technique was lost in the long history. Magic spells such as the power multiplication spell and the body lengthening spell that Lewis once saw were transformation spells cast internally on oneself. Ancient wizards even had transformation spells that transformed into dragons or other magical animals. With the efforts of later generations of transfiguration masters, the basis of modern transfiguration was developed based on ancient books. Animagus is the most outstanding magic spell to turn objects into life or change life into another life. Professor McGonagall told the history of transfiguration step by step. Even though Lewis had read many magic books, especially when he was in Nurmengard, he had read many Grindelwald's collections. But he still had never heard of the history told by Professor McGonagall, and Mr. Flamel had not explained it to him. But Mr. Flamel probably knew it. When Mr. Flamel was born, the science of material transformation had not yet declined, and the entire wizarding world was learning material transformation magic. My animagus form is a tabby cat. You should have seen it before. As she spoke, Professor McGonagall jumped forward, and when she landed on the table, she had already transformed into the form of a tabby cat. After her body changed again, she returned to her human form. In animagus form, no magic can detect your true identity. Even Akazban, known as the most powerful prison, has no magic to detect the wizard's animagus. Professor McGonagall was quite impressed. Said proudly, I mainly study modern transfiguration and some ancient spells. After you join the association, I can take the time to teach you ancient spells. Yet. Thank you, Professor. Louis nodded desperately. Professor McGonagall was so generous, making him feel like he was living in a dream. If Professor McGonagall was a quarter as generous as Professor McGonagall, I would be able to ask him about potions, Louis thought regretfully. Teacher Si was really searching. He would go to the office every time after potions class. No matter how simple Louis' question was, he would not answer Louis' question. Guiding every little wizard to explore his potential, isn't it what we professors should do? I'm not some fussy professor. Professor McGonagall, who was in a good mood, made a rare wisecrack, and the professor in question was naturally the oily man. Chapter 80. He keeps no appearance all day long, and his words have a strange smell. No wonder Lily doesn't like him. Despising Snape in his heart, Louis' expression remained unchanged, pretending to be deaf, sitting on a chair and waiting for Professor McGonagall's next words. No matter how hard Professor Sri Lanka searched, he was also a famous professor, and Professor McGonagall, who was at the same level as him, could make jokes about Professor Sri Lanka in front of Louis. But Louis, as a student, if he takes over Professor McGonagall's topic and joins her in making jokes about Professor McGonagall, it will easily arouse the dual resentment of Professor McGonagall and Professor McGonagall. Looking at Louis' performance, Professor McGonagall, who realized that he had said something wrong, quickly corrected his expression and said in his usual crisp voice, Well, you come to my office this weekend to see me, and I will announce the venue of the fan club when everyone is here. Louis nodded slightly, and then exited the office with Professor McGonagall's polite farewell. Before leaving, Louis specifically asked Professor McGonagall for a professor's permission. He wanted to find some banned books related to transfiguration in the restricted book area. It's not this book, it's not that book. Where is the origin of the transfiguration taught by Professor McGonagall? In the restricted area of the library, a gentle male voice came from a certain aisle. The owner of the voice was a blond boy who looked to be about 13 or 14 years old. He was holding 2 ancient sheepskin books and was looking for something page by page. After learning about Louis' purpose, Professor McGonagall generously issued him a permission certificate, and also told Louis the location of Transfiguration, Origins and asked him to search for it on his own in the restricted book area. Albus, is it really okay to give him permission? Have you forgotten what was like back then? Professor McGonagall asked in the principal's office with a puzzled look on her face. She didn't understand why Dumbledore asked her to issue a license certificate to Louis. Was he afraid that Louis would be exposed to black magic too early and go astray like Tom? When Louis asked her for proof of permission, Professor McGonagall only felt excited for a moment and then suppressed the idea. There are too many black magics in the restricted area, and inexperienced wizards are likely to be confused by the power of black magic and embark on the path of black wizards. Just when she was about to reject Louis, a familiar voice came from her ears. It was the voice of Professor McGonagall's former teacher and current leader, Dumbledore. Although she didn't understand how Old Dang transmitted the message to her, under his instructions, Professor McGonagall could only issue the permit certificate to Louis, and also followed Old Dang's prompts and named a location. Old God Dumbledore was sitting on the principal's chair. The scene in the Forbidden Book area appeared in front of his eyes. Louis was standing in front of the bookshelf holding 2 ancient books with black covers. If it's not them, could it be that I found the wrong one? After searching for a long time but not finding what he wanted, Louis could only put the 2 ancient books back on the bookshelf and take down 2 more books from the side. Both books are wrapped in dark red covers. One of them has a silver skull printed on the cover, and the other book is covered with small vein-like veins, with a black heart in the center of the veins. As if there was some peerless monster imprisoned within the pages of the book, an ominous aura came from the cover. After taking a deep breath and overcoming the discomfort, Louis put the second book aside and slowly opened the cover with a skull on it. As soon as a gap was opened, an irrepressible force came from the cover. The right hand pressing the cover had no time to apply pressure, and the cover opened under the force of Mu Ran. Damn it, it's not like you've opened some black magic tome. Louis was shocked and used all his strength to close the ancient book. Although black magic is good, it must be done with your life. Louis had seen many cases of death due to opening unknown black magic tomes in his family history. The power coming from the book weakened step by step, and the ancient book gradually closed under Louis' huge force. Suddenly, the resistance suddenly disappeared, and the ancient books slammed together under the huge force, making a muffled snap sound. It's finally safe. Covering his pounding heart, Louis took a long breath. It would be nice if he could close it. It's better to go back first, and when I see Professor McGonagall next time, ask where Transfiguration Origins is and I'll come get it. Putting the ancient book back to its original place, Louis was about to turn around and exit the forbidden book area when a black mist emerged from behind him. Seeing this, Dumbledore raised a smile on his lips, his consciousness exited the magic network, and retreated from the forbidden book area into his body. Albus! Albus! Did you hear that? Professor McGonagall's irritable voice came from my ears. Ah, it's Mag, what can you do? Professor McGonagall had a dark face and clenched her fists a little, feeling like she wanted to punch Dumbledore in the face. She stayed in front of Dumbledore for several minutes, repeating the same words over and over again, but in the end Dumbledore actually asked her what was wrong. I'm here to ask you. Is it really okay to give the license to Louis? Aren't you afraid of training him to be the next Dark Lord? Professor McGonagall yelled with suppressed anger. You said this, don't worry. He and Tom are not the same kind of people. He will not become the next Tom or the next Dark Lord, he will only become our companion. If the most powerful organization in the wizarding world, the Keepers of Secrets, all become followers of death, is it still necessary for the wizarding world to exist? The god of death has already overturned the wizarding world, right? However, when he thought about the problem of inheriting the technique, Dumbledore's face turned slightly red despite his old age. It was obvious that the claws of death had already penetrated into the Keeper of Secrets. In the restricted book area, Louis lay on his side on the clean floor, his eyes tightly closed. If his body hadn't been rising and falling slightly with his breathing, others would have thought he was dead. The black mist that had become much thinner still shrouded the side of Louis' head, and he continued to inhale it from his nose, reinforcing the black mist in the sea of consciousness. I believe in him, Minerva, just like I believe in you. I believe that Louis will not betray our camp. Dumbledore said solemnly. The excitement gradually subsided, and Professor McGonagall and Dumbledore looked at each other for a long time before being defeated first. Well, if you insist, then I won't care. But you have to promise Albus not to let him be exposed to dark magic too early. He is still too young. Louis is the first young wizard she has met in these years who is interested in and talented in transfiguration. Even in an era when the material transformation genre was prevalent, few young wizards could master so much magic at Louis' current age. Professor McGonagall did not want Louis to be exposed to black magic too early. After being fascinated by the power of black magic, he forgot about transfiguration, which requires time to accumulate to achieve effects.